Chapter 1684. After Zhang Yan bid farewell to Huan Tong, with a single thought, this incarnation had already appeared at the place where the wisp of demonic qi had gone to. This was a realm sky with weak spiritual vigor. Below it, the mountains had collapsed, the land was cracked, and water vapor rose. There were evaporated lakes and swamps everywhere. Between the scorched trees and rotten leaves, countless broken tiles and ruins could be seen. Only from the half-collapsed wall pillars, it could be seen that there should have been magnificent palaces everywhere. This place should have experienced a fierce battle not long ago. Just from the traces on the surface, it should have been within the last 10 years. He concentrated for a moment, and scenes of the past floated past his eyes. Immediately, he understood most of the situation here. This was originally a realm sky where the human path occupied the mainstream. Although the spiritual vigor was not flourishing, there were many people who knew the way of cultivation, and most of them were inclined towards the path of artifact forging. The cultivators here paid great attention to regulating the heaven and earth, adhering to the rule of taking one thing to make up for another. Although they took a lot from the heaven and earth, they were very restrained. If this continued, it would not be a big problem to maintain this for another 1,000,000 years. This generation used the limited external objects in their hands, but they could do all kinds of great things that exceeded their own abilities. Perhaps they had already realized that the spiritual vigor of the heaven and earth would completely disappear one day. Before the unforeseen event happened here, they found a piece of strange black wood from somewhere and prepared to use it to forge an artifact. Their goal was to break through the barrier of the realm of heaven and earth and travel beyond the void. Zhang Yan realized that he could not see the past of the big wood. It seemed that it was the unfettered wood. However, this object only looked to be tens of thousands of feet long. For the legendary heavenly wood, it was too short. Perhaps this one was only a part of it. Originally, if there were no unforeseen events, then the people of this realm would very likely not be restricted to this world. However, this hope was completely shattered after the arrival of tens of thousands of demons from beyond the sky. He noticed that the leader of the invading demons was a large demon wearing a horned helmet. His cultivation was around the 5th layer of the strength path. After destroying this place, he found the huge piece of wood and used some kind of magic tool to travel to another world. Only a few small demons remained. Because they were all demons that had just gained intelligence, they did not attract his attention at first. With a thought, these monsters all turned into dust. Then, he grabbed a wisp of qi. Although the qi given by Huan Tong was only up to this point, he had already found a clue. As long as they did not return to Busu Tian, he could continue searching. After a short search, he found that he had gone to another realm sky. As soon as he arrived, he saw countless demons fighting some cultivators and some human cultivators. In this realm, it was clear that the cultivators of the human path coexisted with some other species. At this moment, they were working together to defend against the invasion of the demons. However, the cultivators here were much stronger than those in the void, and both sides were fighting back and forth. He knew very well that there was a reason for those demons to find this place. It was very likely that the remains of the unfettered wood were here. Thus, he swept his gaze around and quickly found something similar in an underground palace. There were layers of protection around it. It was clear that the people of this realm attached great importance to this item. At this moment, the demon leader wearing the horned helmet was holding a black leaf in his hand. He was riding a magic raft and flying in that direction. It was obvious that he was relying on this item to find the whereabouts of the target. This demon cultivator was very powerful. Although many cultivators came to stop him along the way, and even set up many formations, they were all broken through by him with his powerful body. It was almost as if he had entered a realm where no one could stop him. Zhang Yan was not in the mood to watch what happened next. When he focused his gaze, the demon's body stiffened and then collapsed. No matter how powerful it was, as long as it had not reached the true Yang realm, it was no different from an ant in front of him. After dealing with this demon, he guided with his mind and took the black leaf and the broken piece of wood from its body. The demons below sensed this and could not help but be shocked. They looked up and saw a black-robed Taoist standing in the sky. There seemed to be endless light flowing around his body, and even the light of the sun, moon, and stars was covered. They were all knowledgeable, and they all looked terrified. They said, "The incarnation of Yuan Zun." All the demons that had invaded this realm lost their will to fight in an instant. They all fell from the sky and crouched there, trembling. Some of them even had their skulls split open by the magic treasures, but they did not dodge. This scene shocked the cultivators of this realm. At this moment, there was a floating island in the sky. On it stood 2 Taoists and a foreign species. Behind each of them stood many disciples and clansmen. They were the 3 people with the highest cultivation in this realm. Just now, it was because of their existence that they were not at a disadvantage in the battle against the demon. When they saw this, they were shocked. After a nervous discussion, they pushed out a green-robed Taoist and let him go to the sky to negotiate. After this person left the floating island, he went to the sky. What shocked him was that although he did not look far away, no matter how he walked, he could not get closer. Zhang Yan held the black leaf in his hand and sensed it for a moment. He felt that there was a similar qi dynamic in different realms. He nodded and kept the item. He looked down and saw a Taoist walking towards him. He used his divine art and moved the Taoist in front of him. The Taoist realized that he was close to him in an instant. He had no idea how he got up here. He could not help but secretly exclaim at this kind of divine art. He calmed his mind, put his palms together, and bowed. He said, "Little Taoist Lai Ji greets great sage." Zhang Yan said, "Fellow Taoist Lai Ji is the person in charge here?" Lai Ji bowed and said, "Yes. Thanks to the favor of the fellow Taoists, I am the person in charge." At this moment, he could not feel any qi dynamic from Zhang Yan. It was as if the person standing in front of him was just an illusion. If he thought about it carefully, it was as if they were in different realms. There was no way to judge the realm of this person. And the more unpredictable it was, the more he was in awe. He took a deep breath and slowly raised his head. He tried to ask, "Great sage, are you here to hunt down those demons?" Zhang Yan shook his head and said, "They are not worth I doing this. I am here to take something." Lai Ji's heart shook. He said, "What does great sage need?" Zhang Yan did not hide and said directly, "The broken wood that fellow Taoist Lai Ji placed under the underground palace." Lai Ji hesitated and said, "So great sage is really talking about that divine wood?" Zhang Yan nodded and said, "This wood is called the unfettered wood. If it is used to forge treasures, it is quite useful. It is not wrong to call it the divine wood. Those demons are here for this. I will not allow this item to fall into the hands of these people, so I have come to take it. However, I will not take your item for free. I will naturally compensate you." In a short moment, Lai Ji had already made a decision. He said, "I dare not. If this item is left here, it will only bring more trouble to my generation. Great sage, please take it away. As for compensation..." He paused. "This is not something that belongs to us, and I dare not take it for myself." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "This item has no owner. Since it has fallen here, it is fated with you." He stretched out his hand and pointed. A talisman flew down. "I have observed the techniques of the world. At fellow Taoist's realm, it has reached its limit. There are 3 advanced techniques here. You can take it and read it." When Lai Ji heard this, he was pleasantly surprised and excited. No matter how mysterious the divine wood was, how could it compare to a technique that could guide one to the Tao? He bowed and repeatedly thanked Meng Hao. Zhang Yan had no intention of staying any longer. With a wave of his sleeve, he took the broken piece of wood, then turned and flew away. When Lai Ji looked up again, he found that there was nothing in front of him. Feeling disappointed and frustrated, he tightened the talisman in his sleeve and turned to flee. There were still many demons waiting for them to deal with. After leaving this world, Zhang Yan followed the aura on the leaf and searched. This time, he did not encounter any demons. Before long, he had found all the remaining pieces of wood. Originally, he should have taken the item back to the mountain and sea realm. However, he suddenly stopped in his tracks. Everything seemed to be going too smoothly, as if the unfettered wood were just waiting for him to take it. It wasn't that he had sensed something, but that something was wrong. As far as he was concerned, the unfettered wood was a rare and precious material, and yet they had given it to the demonic cultivators down below, instead of sending their clones to retrieve it. No matter how he looked at it, it seemed a bit reckless. Having reached this point in his train of thought, he flicked his sleeve, summoning the black leaf and the rest of the wood. After examining them closely, he finally found the problem. There was still a part of the unfettered wood that was missing. It wasn't a broken branch, but something similar to the black leaf. And it seemed to be pointing to Bushutian. His eyes flickered. This meant that if the demons still had something like this, they might be able to use it to find him in the mountain and sea realm. If he wasn't mistaken, then it was highly likely that the demons had deliberately set this up, with the goal of luring him into their trap. It was just that the plan was a bit crude, so he had found a flaw in it. Actually, that was normal. Khanate demons were born with incredible divine abilities. Other than almighty true yang cultivators, they could suppress everything with raw power. However, in the higher realm, they could divine the workings of heaven. When it came to scheming against the hearts of people, they weren't necessarily as accurate. Of course, in the true yang realm, as long as they were careful with their calculations, they would be able to perform a flawless calculation. As long as they put their mind to it, they could even perform a flawless calculation. However, there was a problem. Because true eye cultivators plotted against each other, if one side performed too many calculations, then the other side would definitely be able to sense it. Even the workings of heaven couldn't be completely concealed. Therefore, when dealing with people of the same generation, it was usually best to be direct and direct. Repeated calculations would make it easier for the opponent to sense them. He snorted coldly. Although he had seen through everything, it was still a dangerous situation. Almighty cultivators could seek fortune and avoid calamity, but most of the time, they relied on their own intuition. Thankfully, he hadn't been in the true yang realm for very long, so he didn't rely entirely on intuition. Instead, he relied on whether or not his intuition was reasonable. If he wasn't careful, then he really might fall into a trap. Chapter 1685. From this, Zhang Yan could tell that the demons and devils weren't willing to just sit around and wait. Not only were they paying attention to what was happening outside, but they were also occasionally resorting to some sort of countermeasure. Things weren't going smoothly, and he had to be careful of them continuing to cause trouble in the shadows. He had been cautious this time, and had been able to detect it ahead of time. But if it happened again, he might not be able to avoid it. Now that he thought about it, if he hadn't been able to detect it, it wouldn't have been just the mountain and sea realm that would have been exposed. He might have even been exposed to places he had been to, such as Dan Yi's nameless realm, or the hiding place of Mo Tsang and the others. But now that he had detected it, he wasn't going to let them have their way. He looked at the broken pieces of wood. They had been delivered to him, and he wasn't going to refuse them. He was going to figure out a way to make use of them. With a thought, he appeared in the middle of a desolate world. He tossed out the unfettered wood, which floated in front of him. Just now, although he had discovered some problems with it, he couldn't guarantee that it wasn't a trap within a trap. He still needed to be careful. After all, he was only an incarnation, and there were some things that he might not be able to see through. Furthermore, this place had nothing to do with where he had been before, so even if the demons and devils found this place, they wouldn't be able to do anything. Only by severing the connection between the unfettered wood and Bushutian would he be able to use it. The best way to do that would be to send it into the elephant dragon gold furnace and refine it into a magical item. Then it would be useless, as it would become something else, and the karma of the past would be severed. However, the furnace was still in the hands of Dan Yi and Mo Tsang. He would have to wait until they finished refining it before he could take it back. Based on his calculations, it wouldn't take many years, and he should be able to make it in time. After thinking about it for a moment, he sat down. Inside of Bushutian, several consciousnesses were communicating with each other. The unfettered wood wasn't taken to the place it was supposed to go. It's just been left somewhere. It seems our plan has been seen through. It's a small change, but it won't affect the overall situation. The restrictive spell formation is about to be undone, and it won't be long before we leave. When the time comes, we can resolve the karma. If the human Tao doesn't perish, then it would be difficult for me to become the ruler of this world. Now that the opportunity is before me, I can replace it. After exchanging a few more words, the several consciousnesses quickly dispersed. In the mountain and sea realm, the Jade Kun, Ingui, had already arrived at the realm gate on Zhang Yan's orders. However, he did not enter the realm gate. Instead, just like in the Xianhong heaven, he created a half-world for himself to reside in. Ingui sensed it and leaped up from the void sea. It circled around the Kun in an extremely intimate manner. Its body was huge, but in front of the Kun, it was like a child. Four beams of clear light flashed in front of the world gate as sect leader Qin led Meng Zhida, Qiantian, and Shen Baishuang out of the mountain and sea realm and into this half-world. Shen Baishuang looked at Yu Kun and said, "The cave abode left behind by the patriarch is in this fellow Taoist's body?" Sect leader Qin looked at the Kun and said slowly, "This is not only the cave abode of the patriarch, but also a place where the disciples of our Qinsang hide from the tribulation." He had already informed the Reverend mortal metamorphosis of what Zhang Yan had told him. However, that was all. Because this matter was too important, it was not appropriate to spread the news before the preparations were completed. Sect leader Qin ordered the three of them to stay here while he went forward. He cupped his hands and said, "Greetings, fellow Taoist Ing Zhao." Ing Zhao pacified Ingui, who was playing around, and replied in a serious tone, "Greetings, sect leader Qinsang. The Xianyuan Exalted has already given me instructions. I will need to listen to the arrangements of the Exalted Ones." Sect leader Qin said, "Please open the door, fellow Taoist. These disciples and I would like to enter the cave abode of the patriarch to take a look." Yu Kun agreed. A ray of spiritual light was released from his body, and a rainbow road was instantly laid out. Sect leader Qin waved his horsetail whisk and stepped on the rainbow light with the three of them. After a short while, they appeared in a vast sky region. There were floating cliffs everywhere, and clouds and mist shrouded the place. Spiritual vigor flowed like light. He looked at the scenery in front of him and said, "Hall Master Duzhen once said that this place is mystical. Everyone has their own opportunities. If we were to stay together, we would be hindering each other. Let's split up." The three of them cupped their hands and went their separate ways. After Shen Baishuang bid farewell to the others, he randomly chose a direction and walked. However, after a few steps, he could not feel the aura of the others. However, with this thought in his mind, he faintly felt something and instantly understood. There was nothing fixed here, and there was no direction or distance. As long as there was a thought in his mind, all kinds of things would appear at will. Since that was the case, he did not think too much about it. He just wanted to find a place that would be helpful to his cultivation. In an instant, the scenery outside changed. The original hazy image became clear. Not far away, there was a tall yellow cliff. The clouds above were dyed gold, and the water at the bottom was emerald blue. Although it was ethereal, it did not lose its magnificence. In a flash, he had already entered an empty cave in the cliff. The surrounding copper shelves in the cave were filled with ancient books and jade scrolls. He walked to the side and randomly picked up a scroll to open. He realized that it recorded secret techniques that he had never seen before. From the looks of it, the original techniques of Qinsang school were of the same origin. It was not difficult to understand. He raised his head again and saw that all the items placed here were similar to him. However, after thinking about it, he only stood at the same spot and did not go to other places to look. As the person who guarded the golden pavilion, he was very clear that sometimes knowing too much might not be a good thing. It was very likely to cause one to be at a loss of what to do. If one were to be greedy and seek perfection, it would instead disturb one's own cultivation. As soon as he thought of this, 99% of the books that he had seen before were gone. Only a few books were left on the shelves. Seeing this scene, he immediately understood that this was not only an opportunity, but also a test of the heart. If he had any wild thoughts just now, he might have sunk into it and dragged down his cultivation. However, his will was strong and there was no lingering fear in his heart. He was calm. He randomly found an empty space to sit down and tried to understand the secret techniques recorded in the Jade Scrolls. At the same time, the people who entered the cave residence this time also found their own fates and stopped to cultivate. Although there was no one in charge of the Qinsang school, when they came out, the daily affairs had already been taken care of, so there was no chaos. Zhang Yan's incarnation stayed in the deserted world for 10 years. Until one day, he suddenly felt something and saw a stream of light. The elephant dragon golden furnace flew over and landed at his feet. He knew that Dan Yi and the others had finished using it and sent it back to him. He thought for a while. This item was originally a miracle of creation. If he changed it and used it purely as a treasure, it would be a waste of such a miracle. He should bring out its true nature. There were 3 great heaven-supporting trees in Bushu Heaven, Wujiu, Wuwang, and Wuji. They each had their own uses. The guiltless wood was able to harmonize the spiritual vigor, and it could make all living things flow smoothly. The ancient cultivators all liked to break off a branch and store it in their cave abode. After refining this item, they could even place it in the sea of vitality to make the circulation of vitality smoother. The Wuwang wood could calm the heart and mind, suppress the demons in one's heart, and prevent evil. If a true young cultivator could not use the heartless technique, he only needed to take a piece and refine it to calm his chaotic thoughts. It was also very useful for incarnations. As for the unfettered wood, it was known to be unaffected by external causes and could avoid all techniques. If a cultivator obtained it, he could use it as a house and travel anywhere he wanted. He would not be suppressed and restrained. Among the 3 trees, the unfettered wood did not have a fixed residence. It could suddenly enter the sky and suddenly enter the ground. That was how it was able to avoid being destroyed early. It was only when it was taken care of that it stopped running around. However, under the great change of the sky, it was difficult to escape. From Zhang Yan's point of view, no matter what you are, as long as you exist in this world, you must be bound by the laws of the world. As long as you enjoy great benefits, there will be a tribulation. You can either face it head-on or find a way to eliminate it. How could you avoid it every time? The unfettered wood did not actually avoid the tribulation. It merely delayed it. However, with the accumulation of cause and effect, it would eventually come true. For example, true young cultivators also had internal conflicts. This was actually a way to follow the laws of the world and protect oneself. Of course, if you had enough strength to resist the tribulation or had a way to avoid it, then you wouldn't have to care about this. However, most cultivators didn't have this ability. The tree had been able to escape the change in Busu's world, but this was not necessarily a bad thing for it. If it had not experienced this, with its actions and the countless karmic entanglements, it would have blocked all its paths to survival. It would have died, but now there was still a remnant of it left. After thinking about it, he decided not to make too many changes. It was best to chisel it into a spirit boat. In fact, he had an advantage here. There were many discussions about how to refine this item. These were all recorded in ancient books, and there were many detailed steps. Since there was wisdom from the predecessors, there was no need for him to make further deductions. He only needed to make some slight changes. Because he couldn't obtain some of the precious materials in Bushu Heaven, he could only replace them with suitable materials. Although the effect would be reduced, there was nothing he could do about it. However, just as he was about to start refining it, he paused and smiled. So you're not being honest. Since there are still some here, I'll use it. However, he noticed that there was still a small amount of mystical chi left in the elephant dragon golden furnace. It should have been extra when refining the golden lotus last time and it had secretly taken it. This thing was a good thing. true young cultivators had the ability to achieve anything they wanted. However, the items in Busu heaven might not be able to be completely restored, but with this strange chi, they could be restored to their original state. This way, he would be able to find the precious materials that he lacked. The elephant dragon golden furnace sent a thought to him, seemingly very unwilling. Zhang Yan smiled and said, "This time, I'm borrowing it from you. Don't be anxious. If you survive this calamity, I'll naturally find something good for you in the future. Furthermore, you and I can be considered to be in the same boat. If we fail to vanquish the demons this time, in the end, we'll just be benefiting this generation." Although the elephant dragon golden furnace was still a little reluctant, it could still distinguish the pros and cons. As soon as the furnace lid was opened, it released all the remaining mystical chi. Zhang Yan smiled. With a thought, all the remnants of the unfettered wood were thrown into the furnace. Chapter 1686. Zhang Yan placed the unfettered wood into the cauldron, and at the same time, he visualized. As the strange chi dispersed, the treasures that originally existed in Busu Tian gradually formed and fell into the cauldron following the refinement process. The elephant dragon gold cauldron was also constantly buzzing, and there was a mist rising from it. But not long after, the object emitted a sense of joy. This was because if he could refine something of high quality, it would also be beneficial for perfecting himself. However, the unfettered wood was one of the 3 heaven-supporting trees in Busu Tian. Even though it was damaged, its original self had not changed. It was definitely not something that ordinary treasures could compare to. If he really put the whole piece of divine wood in, perhaps the golden cauldron might not be able to withstand it. The current situation was the best. However, after all, it was a divine wood, and the refinement time was far longer than ordinary treasures. After refining for more than 10 years, there was only a slight movement. The sound of emptiness came from within the cauldron, like the beating of a drum. The broken wood also produced a strange change. It actually melted like ice and gathered in one place. On the surface, it looked like it had turned into a ball of flowing water, as if it could change at will. However, this was not the case. The ancient records had long stated that at this stage, the refiner only had a moment to reconstruct it. If he failed, no matter how he fiddled with it, it would still return to its original state, and all the effort would be in vain. If he wanted to do this again, it was only a small matter to waste the treasures again. The more difficult problem was that it would be even more difficult to refine than the last time. This object seemed to be able to adapt to the changes in the outside world. If he failed every time, it would only become more and more difficult until he could no longer refine it. From this point of view, after this object had experienced a great calamity, there was a certain chance that it could avoid the same calamity in the future. He tried to deduce it in the divine will, but no matter how many times he tried, he did not succeed once. This was just as the ancestors' legacy had said. When it came to refining a strange object of this level, it could not be obtained through visualization. He could only rely purely on his own ability to sense the opportunity. If he missed it, it meant that they were not fated, and he could not force it. He smiled faintly. Perhaps he could let nature take its course under normal circumstances, but at this juncture, he could not consider whether it was fated or not. He could only try to force it. This might cause the treasure to be out of harmony with its master after it was completed, but it was better than not being able to use it. Looking at the broken wood turning in the cauldron, he said, "If the refinement fails, to prevent the demons from obtaining it, I will have to refine it to a place where no one can use it, and then bury it." The unfettered wood had been in the cauldron for more than 10 years. Although it had not completed the refinement, it had developed a trace of spirituality. This was unavoidable. Of this unfettered wood. On. Divine time on, and spirit time, and was would had as. Time. Time, it, and would. When Zhang Yan saw this, he raised his eyebrows. There were no records of such a situation in the ancient books. But speaking of which, in the past, those of his kind could only refine a branch at most. Later on, when the divine wood was guarded, they could only take a tiny branch or leaf. How could they be as extravagant as he was? He had gathered almost all the remaining branches, so it was normal for there to be a difference. But from this, he also thought that since those demons were willing to use this item as bait, they must have something even better in their hands. That was why they were at ease and threw it outside. It seemed that the battle against the demons would be even more difficult and dangerous than what he had originally estimated. He calmed his mind and sent out his will. In an instant, the unfettered wood that had transformed into flowing water began to move like a whirlpool. As it turned, it gradually changed into the form he visualized. But at this moment, it began to struggle, as if it was resisting. But the will told him that this was not its original intention. Zhang Yan narrowed his eyes. This situation was a little strange, as if there was an indescribable force that was suppressing it from changing. He had already guessed that this was most likely the means of the Khanate demons, and their goal was probably to prevent this item from being refined by others. He thought to himself, there really is a hidden trick, but nothing can escape from this furnace. This was not a place that his incarnation could resist. Immediately, his will moved and connected with his original body. Suddenly, a vast wave of yuan qi descended from the sky and entered the spirit boat. In an instant, it expelled the foreign force. After a few breaths, the yuan qi was retracted. This time, the obstruction was gone, and his will also became smooth. Soon, it turned into the shape of a long shuttle. Only in appearance, it looked a little similar to the skyscraping spirit boat that he used. Not long after, it was gradually enveloped by a layer of white fog. After a few more years, the golden furnace kept shaking as if it was about to rush out. Zhang Yan had been waiting outside. Now that he saw this scene, he knew that he was about to succeed. However, at this moment, he had only refined this spirit boat. The relationship between them had not been established yet, so he still had to go one step further and make this item completely belong to him. That was why before it was about to come out, he transferred a wisp of aura into it. After a while, the golden furnace quietened down. At this moment, he saw a scene. In the boundless darkness, a wisp of aura was born and continued to grow until it turned into a towering tree. Suddenly, everything shattered and returned to nothingness. He understood that at this moment, this item had severed its original karma, washed away the past, and obtained a new life. Thus, he waved his sleeve and the lid of the furnace was lifted. With a loud noise, a flawless spiritual boat flew out with mystic light. When it first appeared, it was only about 3 meters long, but in the next moment, it grew to tens of thousands of meters long. This wasn't a transformation through a divine power, it was a true growth. However, it ignored all the processes. It seemed that once there was a cause, the result could be achieved in an instant. He waved his hand, and the spirit boat swayed and became about a foot long, just right to be held in his palm. After a brief inspection, he understood the ability of this item. Once it flew, it could travel through the world and land without a name. It did not exist in any place. Even if it was found by a supreme being with a will, it would go to a place that was opposite to it. As long as all the paths of survival were not cut off, it could not be stopped. It was not impossible for a true young cultivator to do this. It might take 1,000,000 years, or even longer, but at that time, there might be new changes in the world. Therefore, if he simply wanted to avoid the tribulation, he could simply ride the spirit boat and avoid it. However, that didn't mean much to him. After all, if he wanted to avoid it, he could accept the invitation of Mo Tsang and the others, and hide in the realm space, or simply go to the Scarlet Continent. He was thinking about using the spirit boat in battle, and using its ability to evade all sorts of magic, he could avoid the precious treasures of the demons. In fact, if he couldn't defeat the demons in battle, then he could send the spirit boat to the mountain and sea realm. That way, the sect and the cultivators of the 9 continents would be able to avoid the tribulation, and then wait for the Tao to rise again. Having reached this point in his train of thought, he looked up at the spirit boat and said in a clear voice, "I'm not using you to avoid the tribulation, but to win. Today, I shall name you Fighting Victory." As soon as he said this, a burst of light shined from the boat, and it disappeared from his hand in a flash. At the same time, above the sea of vital energy, Zhang Yan's expression flickered. Within the divine will, a spirit boat had already appeared. It seemed that with a single thought, he could summon it out at any time. Zhang Yan nodded slightly. Unknowingly, he had already deduced for over 20 years here, and he had gained quite a bit in these past few days. Using the ancestral founder's technique as a foundation, coupled with the comprehension he obtained from the exchanges of others, he had sorted out a total of 3 secret techniques. One of them was used for defense, and the other 2 were completely used to destroy enemies. Although it seemed like everything was going smoothly, it didn't necessarily mean that he would succeed. After all, he still knew nothing about the treasures of the demons, and it was difficult to know whether or not he could fight them. Therefore, he had left a lot of leeway. As long as he knew what he had overlooked, he could make up for it at any time. It was just that when it came to a true battle, there would not be many opportunities for him to do so. However, now that he had the victorious heavenly vessel, he could do as he wished. If things did not go smoothly, with this foundation that he had built beforehand, he could still make some deductions during the battle. Because he wouldn't be able to obtain any more benefits even if he continued cultivating, a strand of his consciousness descended, and he had already appeared in a world sky. Dan E and Michihito Ichido both had clones here, and they had been here for a long time. Seeing him arrive, they both stood up and bowed. "Greetings, fellow Zhang." Zhang Yan returned the greeting. After exchanging a few words, he turned his gaze to the Liheng world sky. There were only a few years left until the 30-year deadline. If there were any abnormalities in the formation, they would have to charge in ahead of time. Michihito Ichido held the disc in his hand, but he didn't perform any more simulations. If he paid too much attention to it, the demons would instead notice something was wrong. As they waited, a few years flew by, but there were no changes in the chi activity in the world sky. Danny relaxed slightly and said, "Looks like that demon isn't in the mood to come out yet. We can still make some preparations." Michihito Ichido said, "Even though we've lost this barrier, it might come out at any time in the next few decades. We have to keep an eye on it." Zhang Yan nodded slightly. It was just a clone keeping an eye on it, so it wasn't anything difficult. Michihito Ichido said, "I think it's better to act as soon as possible. If that demon charges out on its own, it means that it's already prepared for everything. That's disadvantageous to me as well." Zhang Yan understood what he meant. That was the right thing to do. Because as they obtained the fortuitous encounters everywhere, their strength wouldn't increase significantly. The later they acted, the greater the chance of them losing. Danny pondered for a moment and said, "I haven't been able to control the Golden Lotus freely. I still need some time." Zhang Yan sensed for a moment and said, "That fellow Taoist I mentioned is about to come back to life. In the end, this is a matter between the 4 of us. Why don't we wait for him to come back before we decide?" Chapter 1687. Dan E and Michihito Ichido also felt that although they had not met the last person, they could not ignore his opinion. So after a discussion, the 3 of them decided to continue making their own preparations and wait for Fu Qingming to come back to life before discussing the matter in detail. Zhang Yan left this incarnation here to keep an eye on the Liheng world. At the same time, a wisp of consciousness instantly landed in the Yuhuan world. Elder Peng followed his instructions and isolated the inside from the outside. These 30 years could be said to be very peaceful. Because of the world ring, the method of karma points had already spread throughout the upper and lower worlds, and there was no place that it could not reach. Also because of this, some kind of change was quietly happening here. Zhang Yan could feel that something was about to surge out and replace something that originally existed in the world. Regarding the art of revival, the ancient books that he read actually did not have many records. They only talked about how to do it and what kind of divine powers and abilities there were. Everything else was only briefly mentioned and did not go into depth. He guessed that it was very likely that the true young cultivator who recorded these books was afraid that he would have to use this method one day. If the details were known by others, it was very likely that he would be secretly plotted against, so only a rough outline was written. However, it could also be a conventional taboo. Now that he was watching here, he more or less understood the crux of it. Even if the Dharmakaya of a true yang cultivator was destroyed, the original primordial chi sea that was opened would not immediately collapse, because it did not exist in reality. As long as the trace of past cause or the remnant chi activity was not destroyed, it still existed. Although it could not be used again, if a way of retreat was arranged in advance, when it came back to life, it could still be communicated again. Unless the spirit was truly destroyed and the chi activity was completely lost, it was actually not very difficult to achieve such a thing, as long as the enemy was completely killed. Back then, Fu Qingming was prepared for death and had already set up many backup plans. Moreover, the Khanate demon was later blocked by the Great Universal Formation. If Bushutian did not come out, he would not be able to achieve such a thing. After waiting for half a year above the Qinghua sky, Zhang Yan suddenly seemed to have noticed something. He released his consciousness and saw that there was boundless clear qi gathering in the Yuhuan world. All the spiritual vigor was like waves in the sea, surging and faintly gathering in one place. If there was no mistake, Fu Qingming was about to come back to life. The qi activity gathering was not for his own use, but for the Weili to reappear in the world. The primordial qi fluctuated and naturally stirred the spiritual vigor of the myriad world. At the same time, all the cultivators in the Yuhuan world sensed the abnormality. However, they didn't know what was going on and thought that it was an invasion. After all, the battle with the fiends had just ended not too long ago. Zhang Yan thought for a while and with a shake of his body, he appeared in the golden hall of the Cloud Continent. Elder Peng was standing on the high platform of the hall, his face extremely solemn. He was observing the situation of the various worlds through the mirror. Because there was no sign of the turbulence in the aura, he only noticed it just now. At this moment, he had already ordered the people below to activate the formations and restrictions, and ordered the cultivators of the various heavens to be careful. But in his heart, he had a feeling that such a phenomenon was not a bad thing. At this moment, he suddenly felt something strange. He turned his head and saw Zhang Yan walking in from outside the hall. He couldn't help but reveal a look of joy. He hurriedly came down from the platform and bowed. Is the overlord here because of this spiritual vigor fluctuation? Zhang Yan nodded, yes. Elder Peng asked carefully, may I ask the overlord, what is the cause of this spiritual vigor fluctuation? Zhang Yan smiled and said, you don't have to worry. This is because the palace master of your sect is about to return. It will calm down in a while. Elder Peng was surprised and delighted, the palace master is back. Zhang Yan smiled and nodded. Elder Peng suppressed the excitement in his heart and lowered his head, saying, this is a big matter. As the disciples of the sect, we should prepare a good welcome ceremony. However, Zhang Yan stopped him and said, hold on, the reason why the palace master left that year was to deal with the external enemies. I think that this is not a good time to announce it. Let's wait for the palace master to return before making a decision. Elder Peng knew that he had lost his composure. He calmed himself down and bowed, what the overlord said is right. At this moment, Zhang Yan's heart skipped a beat. His consciousness turned and his figure disappeared from the hall. In an instant, he appeared above the blue sky. He looked up and saw a young Taoist standing in the air, looking at the mountains and rivers below. The latter noticed his arrival and smiled, saying, Taoist Zhang is here. Zhang Yan sensed that his vitality had recovered. Just as he expected, he had once again connected with the sea of vitality. His Dharmakaya was now based on the system of karma points. This did not depend on how many places were using this method, but as long as there was a place where the method was being used from top to bottom, then it would not perish. However, since he was resurrected, the amount of vitality that he could use was less than his previous self. Once the consumption exceeded the limit of his body, he would lose all his supernatural powers. He could only wait for his vitality to recover before he could return to his original state. However, there was an advantage to this. As long as the method of karma points was not broken, the external method would not be able to harm him. Hence, as long as the demons did not find out where he was, he could continue to tangle with the enemy. He raised his hand with a smile and bowed, saying, "Congratulations on becoming a Taoist." Fu Qingming returned the bow and sighed, "Most of the memories of the past no longer exist. Now that I have a new life, it is time to start all over again." At this point, he smiled again. "When I am cultivating, my consciousness still exists between heaven and earth, so I can still sense some things. I still have to thank you for taking care of my disciples during this period of time." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "This is what I promised you." At this moment, Fu Qingming seemed to sense something. He looked in one direction and his expression became slightly serious. He said, "Daoist Zhang, did something happen to Bushutian?" Zhang Yan also looked in that direction and said, "Daoist Zhang, many things have happened while you were still alive." Fu Qingming's expression became solemn. He said, "Please tell me." Zhang Yan said, "You were the one who told me about Bushutian being occupied by the demons. However, you have cut off many of your memories, so there are many things that you did not tell me. Later on, I met a fellow Taoist, and just now I know the gist of it." As soon as he came down, he gave a rough account of the situation and didn't hide any of the details. When Fu Qingming heard that, he fell into deep thought. After a while, he said, "In other words, now that the treasure that suppresses the array has flown out, the restriction array has lost most of its restraining power. If the Khanate fiendish demons discover any abnormalities, they can break out of the restriction at any time." Zhang Yan said, "Exactly. Those two Taoists and I have decided to take back Bushutian. What do you think?" Without any hesitation, Fu Qingming replied, "This matter concerns the rise and fall of humanity. I will naturally go with you." Zhang Yan was not surprised. He knew that Fu Qingming would definitely agree. This was not only because he had made this choice in the past, but also because the latter was different from others. His Weili life was completely dependent on the good deeds method. Although he was almost invincible, if he lost his foundation, everything would become meaningless in the end. Thus, he had no other choice. Fu Qingming said, "Where are those two Taoists now?" Zhang Yan smiled. "Aren't you going to comfort your disciples first?" Fu Qingming shook his head. "We can talk about this after we return." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "Friend, please follow me." With a flick of his sleeve, his profound energy surged in an instant, and a five-colored boundary was formed. A path was instantly opened up in front of him, and he took another step into it. Fu Qingming followed right behind him. In a flash, the two arrived at a dark place. But in the next moment, a golden light spread out, and a world appeared. Michihito Ichido, who was wearing a green robe, floated over. He looked at Fu Qingming and sighed. "So it is Taoist Fu. I have long guessed that the person Taoist Zhang was talking about was you." Speaking up to this point, he seemed to know that Fu Qingming had just come back to life, so he probably didn't know many things in the past, so he said, "I'm Yan Jing. I've had some dealings with you before." Fu Qingming bowed. "I have forgotten most of the things of the past. If I have been rude, I hope you will forgive me." Michihito Ichido smiled. "You are too polite, Taoist." He paused for a moment and said, "Taoist Dan Yi is refining the golden lotus in a certain world. Since Taoist Fu is here, the four of us have gathered. Why don't we decide on the day to go to Bushu Heaven? What do you think?" Zhang Yan came here with this intention, so he had no objections. Fu Qingming pondered for a moment and agreed. Taoist Yi flicked his sleeve, and the three of them instantly appeared on top of a magic tower. This place could accommodate mountains and lakes, and there were countless strange spirit birds flying around in the sky. The mountains were rich in color, and the thick clouds lingered in the sky, making the place look like ink. Dan Yi was sitting cross-legged on the side of a green lake that was as smooth as a mirror. The golden lotus was closing its petals under his control. But looking at his expression, it seemed that there was something that he had not seen through. He immediately noticed the arrival of the three of them, and he slowly withdrew the stem and leaf of the golden lotus into his body before he stood up and turned around. Fu Qingming took a step forward and cupped his hands as he said, are you Taoist Dan Yi? Greetings. Dan Yi put his palms together and bowed solemnly, and then he said seriously, all those years ago, you covered for fellow Taoist Huantong, and that was why he had the chance to set up the formation. If it wasn't for the two of you, I'm afraid the Tao of Tao would have been annihilated a long time ago. Fu Qingming replied, even though I have forgotten what happened all those years ago, I can't help but feel regretful when I find out about it. I came here today because I intend to finish the unfinished business with the three of you. Dan Yi nodded repeatedly and said yes. He glanced at the three of them and said, in this way, we can decide on the date of the expedition today. Michihito Ichido said, it looks like you haven't completely mastered the Golden Lotus? Dan Yi waved his hand and said, it's fine. I've already grasped the key point, and I'll be able to master it in a few more months. Michihito Ichido looked at Fu Qingming and said, fellow Taoist Fu, you've just now returned, do you have a suitable artifact with you? Fu Qingming pondered for a moment and said, all the artifacts that I usually use are in Bushu Heaven, but I've already set up some backup plans. Besides, even without these artifacts, as long as I'm still here, they won't be able to harm me. I can go with you to conquer the demons at any time and take back the Tao of Tao of Tao. Chapter 1688. After listening to Fu Qingming's explanation, Dan Yi said, since that's the case, how about half a year from now? If there are no changes in the formation by then I will. As he spoke, the four of them sensed something and their hearts skipped a beat. At this moment, all of them felt as if a piece of everything in the world had suddenly been missing. Zhang Yan thought for a while and understood what had happened. Lu Lin and the others were about to succeed. Not long after, they would be able to hide outside the primordial sea of void, and the demons would not be able to find them. The other three obviously thought of this as well, and they all had different feelings. Dan Yi sighed and shook his head. After Lu Lin and the others retreated, they would not be able to find them again. They did not even know when they would meet again. Originally, if there was a chance of success in the expedition against the demons, they might be able to ask for their help. Now it seemed that it was impossible. However, taking a step back, this could at least preserve the vitality of the people Tao. Even if they failed, they would not be completely annihilated. Michihito Ichido did not have any friendship with Lu Lin and the others, so he quickly retracted his senses and said, those few are about to retreat. I think the demons will become more rampant, and we can't wait for too long. I think that fellow Taoist Dan Yi's words are reasonable. Let's set the date of the expedition to half a year from now. Fellow Taoist Zhang, fellow Taoist Fu, what do you two think? Fu Qingming said, I have no objections. Zhang Yan nodded and said, let's set it at this time first. After the matter was settled, the four of them discussed in detail, and then went back to make the final preparations. Zhang Yan bade farewell and was about to turn back when he thought of something. He stood in the void and looked at the place that was about to disappear. At this moment, he had an indescribable premonition that this matter would not end here. What Lu Lin and the others had done might not go so smoothly. However, they had other plans here, so he could not care about any changes that might occur there for the time being. At this time, in Busushan, the Khanate demons also noticed this anomaly. They seemed to take this matter very seriously. In the heavenly domain, rainbows flashed, and several streams of clear air appeared out of thin air. Then, four figures appeared. On the Qian position was a white-robed Taoist. Below him was a five-tusked white elephant, and behind him were strands of golden lines that depicted the longitude and latitude. His sleeves were large and dragged down, like clouds covering the sky. He looked elegant and at ease. This person was Bai Wei, also known as Spirit Wielder Guangxing Tianzuan. On the Sun position was a green-robed woman. She stood on a leaf, and her beauty was peerless. There was a cinnabar dot between her eyebrows, and she held a mysterious lotus in her hand. Her cloak fluttered in the wind. Her name was Qian Luo, also known as Ling Bo Miao Xing Tianzuan. On the Li position sat a lazy man. He wore a light gray Taoist robe, and he had a high bun and a long beard. There was a turbid cloud around him, and his clothes were embroidered with a horned dragon. He stepped on a three-headed Ganoderma. His name was Lu Li, also known as Baoyuan Zhiguan Tianzuan. On the Zhen position was a middle-aged Taoist. His expression was dull, and his body was like rotten wood. His face was yellow, and his eyebrows drooped to his shoulders. Thick smoke rose around him, and he sat on a greenhorn jade deer. He did not speak for a long time. His name was Dai Gong, also known as De Huan Cheng'en Tianzuan. When Bai Wei saw that everyone had arrived, he said, "Everyone should have sensed it. The heaven and earth have changed, and it is obvious that someone, the human Dao Yuan Zun, wants to open up another world and escape inside. Lu Lin and the others have been hiding ever since they came out of Bu Su heaven. If there are no accidents, the one who did this should be this generation." Lu Li roused himself and said, "This is detrimental to my plan. If there is a human Dao Yuan Zun who is not dead in Bu Su heaven, then it will be difficult for me to be the master of this world. If he escapes, it will be difficult to find him again. We need to find a way to stop this." Qian Luo said indifferently, "There is a restriction outside blocking the door, so how can we get out? We need to break this formation first, then we can talk about other things." Dai Gong said with a bitter face, "There are still 67 years until the day that the formation is dissolved. If we want to break it, we can use my vital qi to shine down and delay the time." Bai Wei said, "Even though the method of Cheng and Tianzuan consumes vital qi, this is the only thing we can do now. This method was actually to make the formation disappear in the blink of an eye. Because this was not just a restriction formation, there was also a suppressing treasure inside. If they were to do this, it would definitely consume a lot of vital qi. Fortunately, this formation did not need them to make a move, so it could only last for a few dozen years. Therefore, they could still endure it. If it were hundreds or thousands of years, they might not be able to do anything even if their vital qi was depleted." Lu Li said, "Not only that, there is another matter that Tianzuan has to consider. There is a human Dao Yuan Zun outside the heavens. He has fought with us several times before, and has repeatedly ruined my plans. I suspect that there is someone else behind him. If they are colluding with Lu Lin and the others, if they see that the formation is broken, they might come to stop me." Bai Wei thought deeply for a moment, then said, "In order to not be delayed, it seems like I can only use the spiritual world Rui. If I hold this treasure in my hands, it will be difficult to do anything, so I might as well use it here." The spiritual world Rui was known as, "All emptiness follows heart method, 1,000 dreams are born." After it was used, one could entrust a wish to it. The more vital qi was used, the more effective it would be. It was just that this treasure could be said to fulfill any small wish, but if it was a big wish, it might not be fulfilled. However, if one used vital qi, it would not be returned. Moreover, this treasure had a flaw. Once it was taken out, it would be separated from the person controlling it. In other words, once the power of the magic tool was displayed, the person opposite them would be able to seize the treasure into their own hands. Thus, to them, this thing was really of little value. Dai Gong reminded, "If this treasure is used, it might be used by the human Dao Yuan Zun to deal with us." At this time, Lu Li laughed and said, "So what? The other Dao treasures are in my hands. Even if I give this treasure away, what can it do to me?" As he spoke, he waved his sleeve. In an instant, a ray of spiritual light appeared, and a picture scroll could be seen floating up and down in it. As if there was a pull of qi, following the appearance of this treasure, the other three people each had an item appear. The four treasures hung above their heads, and for a moment, their light shone through the vault of heaven, illuminating the void. That year when the Bu Su heaven scripture changed, all the treasures that were originally in the possession of the human Dao fell into the world. 7 of them fell into the hands of the 4 of them, but because it was not easy to use, they only had one each now. The one in Bai Wei's hand was called Pure Yin Yang Seal. This item was a seal on the surface, but in reality, it was a sword. It could respond to the movement of vital qi, and it could cut people into countless past and future, and then refine them into pieces and kill them. There was a saying that praised, "The heavens have no name and there is no self," cutting through the void reveals karma. The one in Lu Li's hand was called Mysterious Beginning Sun Mirror Painting. This treasure could be used to sign one's name on the painting. If one was defeated in battle, it could be used to hold on to a sliver of chance of winning, and then it would appear again, and from then on, start all over again. With this item, as long as there was no lack of vital chi, one would be undefeatable. Therefore, there was a saying that said, 100 tribulations do not move, in the painting of 10,000 lives. The treasure that Dai Gong had was the Lu Yuan golden bell. Every time the master struck it, there would be a change in chi, and if the vital chi of the enemy did not move according to it, then it would immediately be suppressed, and it would be difficult to move, making it extremely difficult to deal with. There was also a saying that said, the mysterious palace golden bell reveals the secrets of heaven, the void bell suppresses vital chi. And what Qian Luo had was the Qian Kun inverted gourd. Once this treasure was used, everything in the world would change from order to chaos, and in an instant, there would be thousands of changes, confusing the void, and reversing the positive and negative. Back then, when Patriarch Huantong and the other two re-entered the Bu Su Heaven scripture and tried to take back this place, they were stopped by this treasure. In order to not be defeated one by one, they had no choice but to retreat. There was a saying here, shake it, and the world will wither, shake it, and the universe will be overturned. Although these treasures were refined, they were all originally cultivated by the true Yang mighty figures for countless years, and just now, they already had Tao in them, which was why they were called Tao artifacts. As for those ordinary artifacts, even if they had great power, they could at most be called treasures. Lu Li waved his hand and kept the treasure, saying, Heavenly Venerables, let's not waste any more time. If we wait any longer, we might be able to escape from the human Tao Yuan Zun. Lu Li turned his head and said, that will depend on Heavenly Venerable Guangxing's ability. Bai Wei nodded and took over the Yin Yang pure seal. After holding it, he shook it at the formation, and in an instant, a strand of qi was intercepted. Then, he pointed at it, and it melted into their respective divine wills. The four of them immediately went into meditation. However, after a round of deduction, they were all a little surprised. Because this formation was too easy to break. Originally, they thought that if they wanted to break it, they would need to consume at least half of their vitality. However, if they did it according to the divine wills just now, there was almost no damage. It was as if the formation that had blocked them for millions of years was just a bubble that could be broken with a gentle poke. Lu Li shook his head and said, No, there must be something missing here. The other three didn't dare to let their guard down. They thought that this formation might have been set up cleverly, and they might have overlooked something, so they made another deduction. However, after repeated attempts, they realized that the result was the same. They couldn't help but frown and ponder, wondering if there was something wrong with the formation itself. But even so, the four of them still didn't dare to step into the formation. Because once they did, they might be trapped in it, unable to escape. Dai Gong saw that it wasn't a solution, so he suggested, if that's the case, it seems that only if one of us is willing to test the formation with his own body can we determine whether it's real or fake. Lu Li shook his head and said, this method isn't appropriate. The powerful thing about this formation was that it would become stronger the stronger it was. As long as one person stepped in, their strength could be used by the formation to deal with the others. At this moment, Qian Luo said indifferently, there is still someone who can test the method for me. Have you all forgotten about that person? The expressions of the three of them changed. Since the creation of the world, although there were many Xiantian demons, they didn't die in the tribulations or because their lifespans ran out. However, there was one that was very unique. After it was born, its consciousness was sealed. It wasn't considered to be alive, but it wasn't considered to be dead either. Therefore, it was able to exist until now. Because the four of them considered that there weren't many of its kind, they protected it. They planned to wake it up after they found Zhou Huanyuan Jade and help it achieve success. This Xiantian spirit wasn't as strong as them, but because it was originally blank, it could withstand their qi. If they threw it into the formation, they could test its strength and wouldn't have to worry about its strength being used by the formation. Dai Gong pondered for a moment and said, "This person is suitable." He sighed again. But if there's really something strange about the formation, then this fellow Taoist might not be able to come out. Qian Luo's jade face was cold as she said indifferently, "The heavenly venerables have protected it for countless years, and now it's time to repay them. Moreover, if it doesn't go through the tribulations, how can it enter the world?" Bai Wei only thought for a moment before he made a prompt decision. Qian Luo is right. Let's do it. Chapter 1689. The four Khanate demons usually treated Bai Wei as their leader. Now that he had made the decision, no one refuted him. The place where the Khanate spirit resided was originally set up by them. Now that it was summoned, the four of them had to work together. Now that they were all in agreement, they each did their own thing. After a while, a stone fetus flew over and floated above the four of them. Its surface was smooth and it looked like a snake egg. Inside, a ball of scarlet light could be seen. It was faintly discernible as if it was breathing. This was the Khanate spirit that resided within. Bai Wei spat out a mouthful of energy from his avatar. He blew into the air and sent it in. The other three also sent a strand of energy over. After a while, the scarlet light in the stone fetus shone brightly and it started to tremble. When Bai Wei saw this, he said, "Fellow Taoist, if you can pass this tribulation today, we will help you in the future." With that said, he waved his sleeves and tossed it out. In an instant, it was thrown into the formation. The four of them looked at it. If there was really something powerful inside, they would be able to see it immediately. However, after a while, other than the formation turning, there was not much change. The four of them immediately realized that just now, they had not made a mistake. Something must have happened to the formation itself, causing it to lose its original power. Right now, it's just an empty shell. It's just a facade. Lu Li said, "How can this be? When did this happen?" If they knew that the formation only existed in name, why would they still stay here? They would have made a move long ago. Bai Wei pondered for a while before saying, "It must be because the treasure that suppresses the formation is gone, which is why it's like this. This matter should have happened not too long ago, otherwise we wouldn't have only discovered it now. This is a good thing, we don't have to waste too much energy." Dai Gong reminded, "Guangsheng Tianzuan, if there is a change in the formation, it might attract the human Dao Yuan Zun. We need to use the spirit world Rui." Although the four of them each wielded a Dao artifact, Bai Wei was the first of the four to enter the world, and his cultivation was the highest, so the other three were in his hands. Bai Wei nodded his head in agreement. With a thought, a spiritual light flew out from outer space, and a warm jade scepter fell into his hand. Its entire body was glistening with fine light, and the decorative patterns on the handle just happened to seem like the convergence of clouds and spirits, yet also like a condensed rainbow, causing it to be difficult for others to look directly at it. A scarlet tassel hung from the bottom, and it was tied with a string of colorful jade beads. He focused his attention on this treasure so that he wouldn't be disturbed by the outside world after he left, and now he needed to entrust a wish to it. As long as it wasn't a grand wish like annihilating the enemy, and it was only an act of delaying or concealing the truth, then it was extremely easy to achieve. After looking at it for a moment, he was already focused on it. After a while, there was a wonderful sound coming from the Rui. At the same time, he felt that the vitality in the Dharmakaya was reduced by a lot. He knew that it had already entered the Dharmakaya, so he threw it out and let it go. He said, "Before the power of this treasure dissipates, no one can obstruct us anymore. Celestial Venerables, please attack with me and dissolve the big formation outside." The four of them covered the big formation with their consciousness, and at the same time, they activated their vitality. In just a moment, the big formation seemed to have experienced 100 years, and from the inside to the outside, it collapsed layer by layer, and finally completely disappeared. Then, they carefully retrieved the stone embryo and put it back in its original position. Bai Wei said, "The people's Yuan Zun isn't that easy to deal with. Although we have Dao tools in our hands and won't lose, we still need to be careful, lest we repeat the mistakes of 1,000,000 years ago. When he finished speaking, he waved his sleeves and was already standing outside of Bushutian. The 3 primordial demons also came out with Dao tools in their hands. The 4 of them only needed to identify the location of the qi activity for a moment before they disappeared one by one. At the same time, Zhang Yan, who was cultivating in the Green Sky Hall, suddenly sensed something in his heart, as if something had happened. He pinched his fingers and calculated, but there was nothing strange. Moreover, the thought avatar was staring at Bushutian, and it was still peaceful there, as if there was nothing wrong. However, he had always been cautious. With a thought, he sent the thought avatar closer to check, but after going one round, he found nothing. He thought for a moment, then withdrew his consciousness. Right now, he had more important things to do. Currently, there were already 8 celestial worlds in the divine decree. The last one would be able to connect with each other and form a large array. However, he had encountered a barrier here, as if there was something blocking him, and he couldn't cross it no matter what. Thinking about it, this might not be a bad thing. If he encountered such a situation in his cultivation, it was because his cultivation had reached a certain level, and he couldn't rely on his previous accumulation to climb further. He needed to find the key point, or refine external objects to help him. In the divine decree, there was naturally no need for any external force, and all the things needed could be visualized. Therefore, it could be clearly seen that there was a key point that he had not understood. He was able to sense that perhaps his cultivation in the Tao art was slightly lacking, yet it wasn't extremely far off, and it was merely lacking by a thin layer. If he was able to successfully find the crux and succeed, then at that time, a tremendous change would occur in his cultivation. Currently, he still didn't know when the primordial demon would come out, but that day was not far away, so he needed to seize the opportunity. Therefore, he could only ignore some external disturbances for now. In the depths of the void, in a place with no beginning and no end, Lu Lin and the other 3 were sitting in a circle. There seemed to be something placed in the middle, but they couldn't see anything. This was because that thing was almost non-existent, and no sense could reach it. Lu Lin suddenly opened his eyes, and a sharp light flashed across his eyes. He said, "This person has already left Bushutian." Emotsang patted his head with his feather fan, and said to himself, after planning for 1,000,000 years, there should be an end today. Han Zhao's beautiful eyes were calm. Chen Chan propped his chin, and with a look of realization, he said, "So that's what happened." Just now, at this moment, they suddenly knew many things that they had long forgotten, or purposely covered up. After the change of Bushutian, all the almighty people of human path were stranded in the void primordial sea. Patriarch Huantong found the 4 and wanted to help them take back this place. However, they understood that the Yuanzun of human path should each have a Dao tool, but now that none of them had one, they guessed that they were all in Bushutian. If 2 true young cultivators were to fight, and one of them had a Dao tool, then the other would definitely not be his opponent. It could be said that there was no chance of winning. This was also the reason why they weren't afraid of the true young demon back then. But now, it was very likely that the primordial demon had those Dao tools in his hands. There were at least 7 Dao tools. How powerful would that be? Even if all the people of human path Yuanzun went together, there was no chance of winning, and they might all be wiped out. Therefore, they tried their best to dissuade Huantong from going. Huantong's opinion was different from theirs. He felt that the change had come too suddenly, and that the primordial demon would not have the time to control the Dao tools if they went now. Therefore, he summoned another 2 people, but they had no choice but to turn themselves into a seal. LV Lin knew that if there was no battle, the primordial demon might still have some reservations. But now that 3 people were missing, they would definitely come after them in the future. From then on, they started to plan a countermeasure. At that time, although they had lost all their magic tools, there was still one thing left. It was called the Primordial Chaos Stone. It was originally a precious material to refine another Dao tool, so they decided to use it to refine a land of extreme emptiness. In such a land, even if a true yang body were to enter, they would be trapped inside, unable to return to the world. At that time, as long as the primordial demon was lured here, they could capture him in one fell swoop. The longer it took to refine such an item, the safer it would be. 1,000,000 years was enough, but there was a problem. If they used too much time, it was very likely that the primordial demon would sense it, and they might not fall into their trap again. Therefore, they decided to use a method to conceal it. Only by hiding from themselves could they hide from heaven's will. Therefore, they sealed their own memories, and at the same time, made themselves think that they were trying to create a world of heaven, so that they could avoid the calamity of human path. At this moment, they woke up and understood everything. At the same time, it meant that the primordial demon was about to arrive, or maybe they were already within reach. LV Lin's eyes moved, he stood up and said, "The guests are here, let's go and welcome them." Mo Tsang waved his feather fan and said, "Fortunately, Daoist Zhang and the others are outside. Even if we are not here, human path can still prosper." In order to make this place swallow the primordial demon, they needed to work together, one less would not be enough. Therefore, regardless of success or failure, they would definitely not be able to get out. However, as long as human path still existed, they might be able to escape. The four of them moved their consciousness, and they were already outside. LV Lin raised his head and saw that Bai Wei and the others were already here, and they were all here in person. He could not help but feel relieved. As long as they were here, the scheme would be mostly successful. Now that their chi activity was connected to the world of heaven beneath their feet, even if they were killed on the spot, they would not be able to stop it. Mo Tsang waved his feather fan and said with a chuckle, "Fellow Taoists, since you are here, there is no need to leave." The moment Bai Wei arrived, he discovered the layout of this place, and at the same time, he understood the origins of the past. He sighed and said with slight admiration, "Fellow Taoists, if we did not have a backup plan, we would have really fallen into your trap today. Even if we have several Tao artifacts, I'm afraid we would have no choice but to be trapped here and not be allowed to leave." Chen Chan asked curiously, "What is your backup plan?" Bai Wei held his hands behind his back and said with a smile, "The essence of all things, the creation of the Great One." Mo Tsang paused and his voice deepened. He said, "How could you possibly possess such an item?" Han Shao said coldly, "It is not that we are looking down on you, but that item is a primordial cardinal treasure. With your 1,000,000 years of cultivation, it is impossible for you to refine it." Bai Wei admitted, "You are right. We once tried to refine this treasure, but later on, we realized that this person is indeed not someone we can subdue. Therefore, we made a promise. If we find another Zhou Huanyuan jade in the future, we will gift it to this person and help him achieve success. If one is not enough, we will give him two, until he manifests a Dharma body and truly achieves Tao. Then, this person will agree to help us." Chen Chan exclaimed and touched the back of his head. He said in distress, "It is so simple. Why did we not think of it back then?" LV Wei was silent. Such a thing would definitely not be done when the ruler of humanity, Bushutian, was still alive. Furthermore, it was impossible for him to allow such a treasure to achieve Tao, because it would undoubtedly pose a great threat to him. Mo Tsang sighed, "Fate, fate." Bai Wei smiled. There was something he did not say just now. Such a promise was only exchanged for that person's promise to help them 3 times. Otherwise, there would be no need to consider so much. They could just break the formation and leave. Now that they were about to use it, he laughed again and said, "Everyone, farewell." He cupped his hands towards the sky. "Fellow Taoist, please make your move." As his words fell, an unhindered golden light suddenly flashed. With a loud bang, the space there suddenly collapsed. Chapter 1690. That flash of light flashed across the entire primordial sea of void, but it was fleeting. At the same time, most of the cultivators in the myriad of worlds in the universe didn't sense anything unusual, but all those who'd cultivated to a certain level faintly felt a trace of uneasiness, and those who were even more profound felt as if a great calamity was about to befall them. However, they didn't know what the problem was. Zhang Yan also felt it at this moment, but he could clearly tell that something had happened to the void space that Lu Lin and the others had opened up, so he immediately sent his consciousness down and met up with Dan Yi and the other two again. Fu Qingming tried to sense for a long time, but he found that it was a blur in front of him, as if something had blocked his vision. He said doubtfully, "Just now, the turbulence is very strange. Could it be that the four fellow Taoists did not succeed in splitting the world sky?" Michihito Ichito also felt that something was wrong. Just now, the light was fleeting, as if something had happened a moment ago, and then suddenly returned to normal the next moment. This was very unusual. Zhang Yan thought for a while and turned to look at Dan Yi. The latter's expression had been strange since just now, so he used his divine will to transmit a message. "Fellow Taoist, did you discover something?" Dan Yi replied in a low voice, "Some of the memories that I lost a long time ago have returned, especially regarding the treasures that were in the hands of the demons. I can remember them all now." Zhang Yan's eyes flashed, and he immediately understood the meaning of this sentence. Until now, all the people of the human Dao Yuan Zun that he had met had said that they only remembered that the Khanate demons had powerful treasures in their hands, but they did not remember the names of the treasures and their specific power. This was because after the change in Busu Tian, a part of the connection that involved the treasures had been cut off. But now, it had suddenly reappeared. There was only one reason, and that was that the precious treasures had most likely been taken out of Busu Tian and fell into the void essence sea. Once again, they were connected, and their memories would naturally return. But the problem was that these things were in the hands of the Khanate demons. If they appeared, it was very likely that they had come out. Connecting this with the movement that came from where Lu Lin and the others were hiding just now, the answer was obvious. Michihito Ichito and Fu Qingming obviously thought of this as well. Their expressions changed abruptly, but at the same time, they still didn't dare to believe it. One of them was a non-human cultivator, so he did not know much about the treasures that Yuan Zun possessed. The other one had completely lost his past memories, so it was hard for him to confirm this matter. Michihito Ichito thought for a while and said, "Could it be that the demons sensed that Lu Lin and the others were about to escape, so they threw the treasures out of Busu Tian in an attempt to stop them?" Dan Yi said in a heavy voice, "The situation is even worse than that. Those demons would definitely not let those treasures leave their hands, so they must have personally broken out of Busu Tian." Michihito Ichito frowned and said, "But fellow Taoist can see that the Great Formation is still intact. How did they come out?" Danny sighed and said, "That must be because someone obscured the heavenly secrets and even our senses, so what we are seeing now is not real." Zhang Yan raised his eyebrows. He had felt that something was wrong earlier. It seemed that Busu Tian was currently abnormally calm on the surface, but in fact, there was a problem long ago. Fu Qingming was a little surprised and said, "It may be possible to obscure the heavenly secrets, but to hide from the senses of the four of us, and even create this illusion, this is no longer the ability of someone of the same generation." "Who has this ability?" Danny said, "I believe that this should be the work of a magic treasure. Among the treasures I recall, only one can achieve such a feat, and that is the spirit world Rui. It has the ability to place one's thoughts on it, and only a treasure of this level can deceive us." Fu Qingming immediately caught a trace of something wrong here and said, "Since this treasure is so powerful, and the demons have used it, then we should not have been able to find any clues. But just now I feel that something is wrong. Is it that the demons are not able to control this treasure as they wish, or is there a mistake somewhere?" Dan Yi's expression became even more solemn and said, "If my judgment is correct, then those demons must have used an even more powerful method, causing this treasure to be shaken, and a trace of the heavenly secrets leaked out, which is why I felt it." "An even more powerful method?" Michihito Ichito thought for a moment, then reacted and said in surprise, "Fellow Taoist, are you talking about that treasure?" Danny sighed and said, "It should be that treasure." Zhang Yan asked at this time, "Fellow Taoist, do you remember the origin of this treasure?" Danny nodded. When Fu Qingming and Michihito Ichito heard this, they were almost certain that this matter was true. Otherwise, he would not have remembered it for no reason, and their hearts sank. Zhang Yan said, "I would like to ask fellow Taoist, what is the name of this treasure, and what is its power?" Danny said honestly, "According to what I know, this treasure is called the Tai Golden Pearl." Although many great cultivators have tried to sacrifice and refine this treasure, no one has ever been able to use it. Only a few Yuanzun have judged that it has the ability to suppress all things and suppress all forms of Weili. Michihito Ichido's heart also sank, but he was very puzzled and said, "A million years is definitely not enough to sacrifice and refine this treasure. How did he do it?" Dan Yi said, "This is hard to know." Zhang Yan thought for a while and said, "Everyone, I think that this treasure may not have been sacrificed and refined by him. Even if this treasure is in the hands of those demons, he should not be able to use it as he pleases. Otherwise, why would he spend so much effort to conceal our senses? Wouldn't it be better if he directly broke out of the forbidden formation and killed all of us once and for all?" When the other three heard this, they all nodded. This deduction was very reasonable, and it was a great fortune in misfortune. One must know that the Tai Golden Pearl was a Khanate cardinal treasure. If the demons really had this treasure, they would not be defeated no matter what. In other words, if these demons could really control this treasure, then there would be no hope for humanity. Fu Qingming deduced, if that is the case, we still have a chance. Just now, there is a feeling coming from the depths of the void. It might be those demons fighting with those four fellow Taoists. If we wait for them to be defeated, we will be even weaker. Should we go and help them now? Michihito Ichido agreed and said, "At this moment, the heaven's secret is concealed. It means that the spirit world Rui has not been removed. It is very likely that there is still a battle going on here. If we go and help them, the result is also hard to predict." However, Dan Yi didn't agree with his words and said, "Everyone, this is impossible. With the spirit world's wishful will blocking the way, it's impossible for us to go around it unless we break through this layer of concealment. However, if the master senses it, he can send his vital qi in." Fu Qingming said, "If it is just a competition of qi, there is no need to fear. I have fellow Taoist Zhang here. I do not believe that the qi of those demons can suppress us." Dan Yi was still not optimistic and said, "It is not that easy. As long as this treasure is willing to entrust someone's wish, before it is completed, no one can move it away. Although the spirit world Rui might not be the most powerful among all the treasures, it was the most difficult to deal with. If it was really activated, there was almost nothing that could break it. Moreover, before this item was entrusted, as long as it was willing to provide a sufficient amount of origin qi and was successfully activated, then its power would be almost limitless. If it was not for the fact that this treasure might not respond to the master, causing the return to be unequal, it would be enough to be listed as one of the three most powerful Tao treasures. Michihito Ichido was not willing to sit and wait. He wanted to try, so he said, "Everyone, please wait for a moment." As he spoke, he changed his mind and his body had already escaped. Although the four of them talked for a long time, they were all using the spirit world, so it was only a moment after they sensed it. After a while, he came back to his senses, then he picked up the disc and calculated. He could not help but shake his head and said, "This treasure is really mysterious." Just now he tried to go to the place where Lu Lin and the others were, but he found that he could not find the boundary no matter what. He then went to Busu Tian, but found that the forbidden formation was still there. There was no sign of it being broken. If he did not know that there was a problem here, he would have suspected that his side had made a mistake. Fu Qingming thought quickly, then he raised his head and said, "Fellow Taoist Dan Yi, in your opinion, is it possible for those four Taoists to escape from the hands of those demons?" Dan Yi sighed and said, "There is such a possibility, but it is very small. Since those demons have come to their door, they will not let them go." Fu Qingming said calmly, "In other words, before they completely eliminate those four Taoists, they will not do anything else. Then, how long do you think this battle will last?" Dan Yi pondered for a moment, then said, "With those Tao treasures, the outcome of this battle will be decided in a few decades or even a century." In fact, when true Yang cultivators fought, it was not like Zhang Yan's secret technique to kill the source of vitality. That was counted in thousands of years until one side's vitality was exhausted. But this was actually at the very least. If one side had Tao tools, it could not be judged by common sense. Michihito Ichido asked, How many Tao tools did fellow Taoists sense? Danny pondered for a moment before replying, there are about 7 of them. I can name their origins. Then, he told them the power of these treasures one by one. After listening, everyone felt the situation was even more grim. Each of these treasures was extremely powerful, and this was only a portion of what Danny knew. There might be even more that he had not mentioned. Fu Qingming said, "Forgive me for being direct, but discovering this might not necessarily be a bad thing for me. Just a single Tao artifact is enough to hold us back and prevent us from advancing. Those fiendish demons have at least a few in their hands. If we just go up like this, how are we going to defeat them?" Michihito Ichido did not speak. After knowing what they were really facing, their previous preparations were clearly insufficient. Now, he kept thinking, trying to see if there was anything that could close the gap. Zhang Yan's eyes darkened. He said, "Everyone, we don't know what's going on over there. There's no point in thinking too much. After these demons defeat the 4 fellow Taoists, they will definitely come for us. Since we can't break through the obstruction, we can only make some preparations. As long as it's not the last moment, we still have a chance to find a way to deal with it." Chapter 1691. The 4 of them knew that the situation before them was extremely dangerous. It was very likely that after this battle, the only true yang cultivators who could survive and fight against the fiendish demon would be them. Only Michito Ichido was not a human path cultivator, but he also knew that he couldn't do anything alone. He wasn't a fiendish demon. If all the human path cultivators were destroyed, would the fiendish demons let a threat like him go? The outcome was obvious. Before, because their memories were cut off, they didn't know the power of those Dharma treasures, so they could only make their own deductions. But now, it was clear. The most frightening thing when facing an enemy was not that the enemy was powerful, but that they didn't know anything and had no clue. Now that they knew, they could at least make some countermeasures. Although the Dharma treasures were powerful, they still needed the master to use them. If they couldn't fight them head-on, they could choose other methods. Danny saw that Zhang Yan didn't say everything, so he asked, "Fellow Taoist Zhang, do you have any countermeasures?" Zhang Yan said, "It seems that we can't attack Busu Tian by force." This time, the fiendish demon didn't let fellow Taoist Lin and the others escape. He didn't hesitate to use his treasures to attack Busu Tian. "It's obvious that he wants to kill us. Then I can set up a forbidden array formation and wait for him to come." It wasn't a good thing to have the initiative in the enemy's hands. It meant that they could only deal with it passively. However, the fiendish demon's intention was very clear. It wanted to completely destroy them, so it was not a bad choice to set up a trap and wait for him to come. At the very least, he had many forbidden array formations passed down by the great underworld patriarch. If he could set them up, they might be able to resist. Michito Ichido thought for a while and agreed with him. He's strong and we're weak. It's hard to attack directly, so we can only do it in a roundabout way. Array formation. Danny pondered for a while. If it was possible, it was indeed a way. He asked, "Fellow Taoists, do you have any suitable array formations?" Michito Ichido said, "I have a few here." Danny said, "Can I take a look?" Michito Ichido said, "Of course." As soon as he finished speaking, 6 sets of formations appeared in his divine will. He said, 3 of these formations require Busu's precious materials to activate, so I used them. As for the remaining 2, although they don't need to do so, their power is lacking. Although Fu Qingming's memory was gone, his eyes were still there. He took a look and asked, "Fellow Taoist, many of these formations seem to be used to restrain true yang cultivators." Taoist Yi answered, "That's right. Back then, in Busu Heaven, in order to restrain their vitality from going berserk, many of my peers had researched and created many formations. I heard that there were more than 30 of them. I'm not a human cultivator, so I don't know much about them." "That's right," Michito Ichido replied, "many of my peers in Busu Tian studied many array formations to restrain their vitality. I heard that there are more than 30 of them." I'm not a human cultivator, so I don't know much about them. Although the array formation can be changed, it needs some suitable items to suppress it, said Fu Qingming. I'm afraid that the array formation might be able to see through it. I have a rough understanding of array formations, so I'm willing to work with fellow Taoists to change the array formation slightly so that they won't be able to see through it easily. Fu Qingming said, the array formation can be changed, but it needs some suitable items to suppress it. I'm afraid that the artifacts we have won't be able to support it. To deal with true yang cultivators, the artifacts inside the array formation could not be picked randomly. It was not that the more powerful the artifact, the better. It had to be compatible with the array formation. At the very least, none of the artifacts they had were suitable. Michito Ichito said, I've also thought about this. If there's no suitable artifact, then we'll pick one from our hands and try to match it with the array formation. If that's not possible, we can work together to refine a suitable artifact with the Elephant Dragon Golden Cauldron. Fu Qingming thought about it and felt that it was a feasible idea. I've thought about it. If things don't go as we wish, there's still a way to make up for it. Fellow Taoist Dan Yi just now said that the spirit world Rui can be used to entrust a person's wish. After it's used, it will definitely be transferred to the enemy. The battle situation is not clear yet, so the treasure hasn't been used yet. After the battle is over, we can use the treasure. If it's just entrusted to the suppressing array, it's not a big wish. Danny thought about it and felt that it was a good idea. Although the item might not be as good as he wanted and could only be used once, it would have a miraculous effect if it was used in the right place. He turned to look at Zhang Yan and said, Fellow Taoist Zhang, since you've brought up this idea, do you have any array formation in your hands? Zhang Yan said, I do know some superior array formations, and I don't need anything to suppress it. It's just that it's not convenient for me to take it out now. I'll have to return to the sect later and discuss it in detail with everyone when I come back. All the array formations he knew were passed down by the great underworld patriarch. Logically speaking, with the rise and fall of the human Tao at the forefront, it was urgent. If he didn't take it out now, he might not have the chance in the future. However, he didn't have the right to show the sect's secret method to others in private, and this matter wasn't something he could do just because he wanted to. If the patriarch set up a restriction here, it would be useless even if he said it. Thus, he decided to go back and set up a ceremony to see if it was feasible. If it really didn't work, then he could only arrange it himself. When Danny heard this, he naturally understood the reasoning behind it and said, it's fine. If fellow Taoist needs anything, just say it and we'll go find it. While the four of them were talking, a ray of light suddenly flew in from outside. When Danny saw it, he immediately knew that it was coming for him. He sensed the aura on it and his expression became serious. He called it over. The moment the light came into contact with his aura, it immediately turned into a talisman. He opened it and couldn't help but sigh heavily. He then passed it to the side and said, Fellow Taoists, please take a look. The three of them looked at it and realized that it was sent by Lu Lin and the others. The talisman clearly recorded all the plans of the four of them and said that if this matter failed, they hoped that the remaining people would do their best to preserve the human Tao. After knowing the whole story, Fu Qingming couldn't help but sigh. He said, this should be set up by the four Taoists 1,000,000 years ago. Once they regain their memories, the talisman will fly over to inform us. Danny thought for a moment and sighed again. He said, indeed. Lu Lin and the others should be deep in a bitter battle at this moment and have no time to care about anything else. Moreover, with the spirit world Rui as a hindrance, it was impossible for any news to spread. Moreover, the talisman only mentioned Dan Yi. This could only be set up before the four of them sealed their memories. Michihito Ichito said, the four Taoists told fellow Taoist Dan Yi about this matter because they wanted the person who came down to fight the demon to have a clear judgment of the situation. Moreover, he paused for a moment and took a breath. He raised his voice a little and said, since the four of you have already predicted that the plan might fail, then you will definitely do your best to delay the battle and fight for a chance for us to set up. The four of them could understand the meaning of this letter. If the four Zhenyang Yuanzun insisted on fighting and didn't seek to defeat the enemy, then they could indeed prolong the battle, but this would also completely cut off their escape route. Dan Yi's tone was firm. We will definitely not let down the four of you. Zhang Yan thought for a moment and raised his head to say, it's hard to know when this battle will end. We need to move faster. I need to go back to the sect first. I will bid farewell to fellow Taoists first. The three of them also knew that the matter was urgent and didn't say much. They were all sent off by Prime Minister Ji. After Zhang Yan's consciousness left this place, he returned to the Kun residence in a single turn. This time, he was here to pay his respects to the Patriarch and to search for the secret knowledge of forbidden arrays. The scrolls that appeared in this place appeared according to his will. The ones that he saw earlier were mostly related to cultivation. That was because that was what he was looking for, not anything else. After arriving here, as the current master of the Kun residence, he immediately sensed a few auras. He immediately understood that sect leader Qin and the others were cultivating here. He didn't disturb them. As his mind raced, he returned to the cave residence from last time. Looking around, he saw many scrolls placed there. There were about 20 of them. Thus, he went forward to look at them one by one. After a moment, he memorized all of them. There were a few powerful arrays here, but it was indeed very troublesome to set them up. However, he found that some of the arrays were very interesting. They first needed to be stored in the divine will and then projected into the real world. The appearance of these things seemed to be the reason why he had previously visualized the restrictions into the divine will. After he browsed through them, he also felt that they were very useful. He decided to go back and try them out again. With a wave of his sleeve, he left the cave residence. With a single step, he arrived at a large hall. There was already an offering table here, and there was a memorial tablet of the great underworld patriarch. This was probably set up after the great underworld patriarch left. He came to the front, put his hands together, and bowed. In this world, demons are rising, heaven and earth are collapsing, and humanity is declining. Disciple and a few fellow Taoists are trying to save this dangerous situation. However, this involves the Tao of arrays passed down by the Patriarch, so I dare not act on my own. Thus, I came to pay my respects and report. After saying that, after a while, he sensed that the formations that he had memorized were not sealed because of this and were still in his memory. He knew that this matter was feasible, so he bowed again, straightened up, and walked out of the hall. When he was outside, he suddenly disappeared from this place. In the blink of an eye, he appeared in the leaf-sea sky, and once again, he came to the forbidden place. This place was originally another cave residence of the great underworld patriarch, and he obtained the truth-linking steel from here. There was a true young creature that was restrained here. Back then, the great underworld patriarch must have used some method to nurture a treasure with its essence. The last time he came here, this treasure had been nurtured for at least 1,000,000 years, but it was not completely refined, so he did not touch it. Now, considering that he was going to fight with the Khanate demons that had Tao tools, he lacked a suitable magic tool. Thus, he came here to see if he could take this treasure. He walked along the tunnel and finally stepped into a stone room. Looking up, he saw a glazed lotus cup placed on the altar. Clear spring water flowed down from above, but this treasure cup seemed to be unable to be filled. There was no water overflowing from the edge of the petals, only some condensed dew. The only difference from the last time was that the jade bead that was originally floating above had disappeared. His eyes flickered slightly. The jade bead was the last essence of the creature. If it disappeared, it meant that the treasure had swallowed it completely. Chapter 1692. Zhang Yan was just about to walk forward to take a closer look when he suddenly felt the outside world become sluggish. There was an invisible force obstructing his body, and it seemed to be trying to push him out. His heart shook slightly. This situation undoubtedly meant that the refinement of the treasure had been completed, and it had already developed its own consciousness, so it was resisting outsiders. Not only that, logically speaking, he had been here before, so once the treasure was completed, he should have at least sensed it. However, He hadn't sensed it before. If no one had interfered, then the treasure had concealed itself from the heavens on its own to avoid being captured and refined. Based on this, if he had come a little later, perhaps the treasure would have been able to escape. He circulated his magic power and was about to push the resistance to the sides. However, as soon as he exerted force, he noticed that the chi movement seemed to have hit nothing and everything had vanished. Upon closer inspection, he noticed that the treasure was slightly different from just now. The edge of the lotus petal was faintly dyed with a layer of light black, but under the washing of the clear water that flowed over from thin air, it was gradually fading. Although the process was extremely slow, it was still ongoing. After sensing it slightly, he instantly knew that it hadn't been swallowed, but had been converted into another kind of chi movement, stored, and even seemed to be able to expel it. However, he was even more interested. The greater the power this treasure displayed, the greater the assistance it would bring after being subdued. So, he flicked his sleeve and continued forward. Even though the obstruction hadn't decreased and was even slightly larger than just now, it was still unable to resist his copious strength. As he approached, the color of the lotus petal gradually darkened, and then it was almost black. Moreover, it gradually extended downwards from the edge of the mouth, but it didn't extend too far. After just a line, it stopped. Zhang Yan slightly nodded when he saw this. This wasn't to say that the treasure's ability was limited to this, but this type of treasure had its own consciousness. However, because it lacked a master, no matter how formidable it was difficult for it to display its full power. Being able to display 10% or 20% of its power was already not bad. Even treasures like the elephant dragon golden furnace usually needed to find someone to refine when mingling in the mortal world, and it couldn't purely rely on itself. It didn't take long for him to arrive before the glazed lotus cup. After observing it for a moment, he raised his hand and took it down before bringing it before his eyes. The object shook and trembled incessantly in his hand as if it wanted to struggle free. At this moment, he could clearly feel that incomparably strong resistance, as if it was not willing to recognize him as its master at all. He didn't mind it at all. This magical item had been nurtured by the essence of that demon, so it must have been contaminated with some of its original wild and untamed nature. As long as he took a stroll in the elephant dragon golden furnace, it would be washed clean. At this moment, apart from the fact that the color of the lotus petals had deepened, it did not display any other formidable power. Presumably, it had already reached its limit. At this moment, there was a sense of resentment and even threat in his mind. However, no matter how you looked at it, there was a hint of weakness in it. He smiled faintly and didn't bother talking to it. With a thought, he summoned the elephant dragon golden cauldron out of thin air and threw it inside. Boom! As the glazed lotus cup fell into the furnace, it was instantly enveloped by the blazing furnace fire. After a moment, a white fish spirit could be seen fleeing in panic. However, no matter how it tried, it couldn't get out, so it sent out a thought of begging for mercy. Zhang Yan's gaze was deep and serene, but he didn't move, allowing the lid to close. He could see that this treasure had not been touched by anyone for millions of years, so it was deeply affected by the otherworldly nature. However, there might be another reason. Human Tao had declined and the demons were about to flourish. Under the operation of the heavenly secrets, that strand of demonic chi had risen instead. It was just that after being purified by the furnace fire, all of this would become false. The elephant dragon golden cauldron wouldn't take long to refine a treasure. At this moment, he only needed to remove that consciousness, and after 10 days, he had succeeded. When he saw there was no further movement from within, he flicked his sleeve and opened the lid of the furnace, causing a strand of dense mist to rise up while the lotus cup stood silently above it. At this moment, it had already become extremely smooth, translucent, and extremely bright. It seemed as if everything inside and outside had been cleansed, and it didn't have the ruthless aura from before any longer. Looking at the elephant dragon golden cauldron, it was silent and motionless, as if it had eaten its fill. He thought about it. It seemed that this glazed lotus cup was an extremely high-quality treasure, and the golden cauldron had obtained many benefits during the refining process. Otherwise, it wouldn't be like this. Now that there was no obstruction, he sent his consciousness into the glazed lotus cup and immediately understood its ability. This treasure could fuse any external force with itself, and transform it into a kind of turbid chi that was stored in the lotus petals. Of course, there was a limit. When the entire glazed lotus cup turned black, it could no longer accept external chi. It could only be used after the clear spring had washed away some of the chi. Fortunately, this chi could be dissolved with yuan chi, and the amount of yuan chi poured in determined the power of this treasure. In short, as long as the owner had enough yuan chi, then logically speaking, they wouldn't be affected by any disasters. This treasure might not be able to display its full potential in the hands of an ordinary person, but in the hands of the right person, it would be very useful. It was a pity that this treasure was nurtured, which meant that it wasn't innate. No matter what, it could only be considered a Tao artifact, and couldn't be compared to the Tai golden bead. But compared to the treasure in his hand, it was better. However, when he took another look, he felt that this treasure wasn't complete. It was refined, and seemed to be used to support something. He dismissed this thought. He couldn't guess what the patriarch's intentions were, but as long as this treasure could help him, it was enough. With this treasure, in addition to the few Dharma artifacts that he had refined earlier, and with the help of the formation, he could fight with that demon. He put away the glazed lotus cup, and with a thought, he returned to the world where Michihito Ichido was. At this moment, the three of them were sitting under an old pine and cypress pavilion, and there was a formation under their feet. It looked like they were discussing the setting up of the formation with their divine wills. When Dan Yi saw him, he greeted, "Fellow Taoist Zhang is back." After greeting the three of them, Zhang Yan took a look at the formation and said, "This trap formation is very exquisite, but it seems to rely on a lot of external objects." Dan Yi invited him to take a seat and said, "Yes, this is set up by fellow Taoist Yi. It's called the Nebula Formation. I've seen it. It's not difficult to set it up, but the objects used to set up the formation need to be harvested from the heavens and refined. The more compatible they are with each other, the more powerful it will be." Zhang Yan subconsciously nodded. He looked at it for a moment and tried to calculate, and found that the formation needed to be set up. That would require at least 10,000 stars. With the strength of the four of them, it would not be difficult to move them. However, the crucial step, which was to refine them to a level close to harmonizing with each other, was not an easy thing to do. Even if it was the same type of object, if it was placed in the most minute of details, it would still be different from each other. Not to mention the stars that were taken from the myriad heavens and realms. Even if they were refined, they would generally be similar to each other. However, the slightest difference could cause the foundation of the array to become unstable. Because this formation needed to borrow a part of the world's power, these stars had to be naturally created, or else they would not have to go through so much trouble if they were to visualize it themselves. He thought for a moment, and with a wave of his sleeve, he took out the elephant dragon golden cauldron and said, "Everyone, use this cauldron to refine it, and you might be able to adjust it." Michihito Ichido did not stand on ceremony. He kept the golden cauldron and said, "I'm afraid this will take a lot of effort, and there's no time to waste. I'll take my leave first." After apologizing, he took his leave. Seeing him leave, Fu Qingming asked with his divine will, "Fellow Taoist, did you gain anything from this trip?" Zhang Yan pointed with his finger, and the arrangement of the three formations appeared in his divine will. He said, "The forbidden formation here is passed down from the eye school, and I'll take a look at it with you." As for the visualization method in the divine will, he did not reveal it at the moment, not because he was selfish, but because it was not a top-notch technique. He could do it because he had a huge amount of vitality to rely on, and if it was someone else, even if they knew, they would not be able to do it. Fu Qingming and Dan Yi listened to him, and their expressions became serious, and they solemnly bowed to him. They all knew that the formation that Zhang Yan had taken out today was definitely an extremely powerful one. Putting everything else aside, just the fact that it could restrain a true young cultivator was enough to show how valuable it was. No matter where it was, it would undoubtedly be a secret technique of a powerful sect. The price that Zhang Yan had paid was definitely not small. Dan Yi understood that even if it was for the sake of dealing with the demons, they would still be benefiting from it after viewing it. Thus, he spoke in a serious tone, "We will not take advantage of you for free. We will repay you in the future." Fu Qingming also nodded. Zhang Yan shook his head slightly. He said, "We can talk about these things later, we need to think of a way to deal with those innate demons first." Dan Yi said, "Fellow Taoist Zhang is right." He looked down and observed for a moment, and after a while, he fell into deep thought. Not only him, but even Fu Qingming was the same, because the formation did not only involve the mysteries of the formation, but there were also many changes in the Dharmic Tao, and the more he looked at it, the more he felt that there were profound mysteries. As their consciousness was too focused, the two of them unknowingly retracted the consciousness clones that they placed in the various worlds. After a long time, the two of them retracted their gazes. Dan Yi was slightly energized. He said, "There are many intricacies in the formation that fellow Taoist Zhang showed that I can't see through, but if I arrange it, it should be able to deal with those demons, and we won't be as helpless as before." Fu Qingming pondered. He said, "Looking at these few formations, we need to work together to arrange them. It's not difficult to solve, but the things that are suppressed are a little troublesome." Zhang Yan said, "I think that fellow Taoist Yi's previous suggestion is worth it. We can refine one or two suitable treasures. We don't need them to last forever, we just need them to deal with this battle." Fu Qingming pondered for a while. He said, "That's a feasible plan. The Dharma treasures that were refined using the previous method could usually last forever, but they did not need to use them in the future. As long as they could deal with this battle, it would save a lot of effort." Dan Yi sighed, "We can't enter Bushu heaven, so this is all we can do for now. Just doing these things will take a long time. I hope that those four Taoists can buy us some more time." Zhang Yan nodded. There was definitely not much time left for them. Maybe the demons would attack in the next moment. They did not have to hope to be completely prepared this time. They could only do as much as they could now. Chapter 1693. Dan Yi was standing next to the lake with the long-stemmed golden lotus in his hand. He circulated his magic power, and a moment later, the 108 petals slowly bloomed. In an instant, rays of light filled the universe as if everything was being nourished by it. At this moment, Zhang Yan was standing at the other end of the lake with his sleeves behind his back. He looked at the golden light enveloping his body and sensed it for a moment. Only then did he realize how powerful the golden lotus was. Once anyone was illuminated by the golden light or stepped into the void created by the lotus, they would be unable to control themselves. If a true yang cultivator was trapped inside, they would have to break free at the first possible moment. Otherwise, they would be constantly weakened. As time passed, they would become weaker and weaker, and if they couldn't break free, they would sink into the void. As for the master, as long as his magic treasure wasn't damaged, he wouldn't be affected. It could be said that it had both offensive and defensive capabilities, and if it was coordinated well, it would be a powerful weapon. But it wasn't without flaws. At most, it could only trap one person of the same generation. Therefore, it was impossible to have the best of both worlds. Moreover, if the master's magic power was consumed or he was killed, the trapped person would be freed. After this test, with a thought, he took out the glazed lotus cup. It floated into the sky, and a faint clear light appeared. The gurgling of water flowed, and wherever it flowed, it seemed to wash away all the impurities in the world. The two lights, one clear and one golden, occupied each other for half a day. Both of them had the aura of immortals, and although they were fighting, they didn't carry the aura of mortals. Ever since the two of them obtained their treasures, they hadn't used them against anyone, so it was difficult to know how powerful they were. This was the perfect time to test their strength. After a long time, the two of them saw the world tremble slightly and knew that they couldn't continue. They withdrew their magic power and put away their magic treasures. Dan Yi sighed. Fellow Taoist's glazed lotus cup is truly marvelous. It is a first-rate Tao tool. If you want to, my golden lotus light won't be able to penetrate it. Through this clash, he was able to verify that even though his golden lotus was quite good at trapping and defending, it was only slightly lacking when it came to attacking enemies. In fact, there was still a lot of room for improvement, and there were even more benefits that he had yet to discover. If he was given enough time, it wouldn't be difficult to slowly refine them. But right now, the only thing he lacked was time. After Zhang Yan took back the lotus cup, he saw that it was stained with a layer of turbid color. When he came close to the forbidden land, the color seemed to be a little darker. However, there was no way to compare it here, because after having a master, the greatness that could be displayed was very different. He channeled his magic power, and in just a few breaths, the turbid air completely disappeared, returning to its original tranquil appearance. However, he felt that something was off. A battle didn't allow him to be too distracted, let alone stopping to cleanse the impure qi. Just being illuminated by that treasure light would take at least a few breaths of time. If it was against a powerful Tao artifact, wouldn't there be no time to resolve it? In that case, the effect of this treasure would be greatly reduced. Even though this lotus cup wouldn't be unable to contain external force after a few rounds of battle, it was important to know that he was going to face more than one Tao artifact. If he didn't get rid of the impure air in time, it would definitely not be able to contain it after a long battle. Therefore, he had to think of a way to solve this problem as soon as possible. It wasn't difficult to say that it was. He just had to deduce a corresponding magic art. Also, this treasure was just now in his hands, but he still lacked a certain level of mastery when using it. If he wanted to refine it to the point where it was connected to his mind at will, it would take a long time. Although the Khanate fiendish demons possessed many Tao artifacts, he was sure that it was impossible for them to refine all of them. At most, they would pick one or two of them as their main Dharma treasures and the rest would only be used as support. And this generation had refined it for at least 1,000,000 years, so they should be able to use it freely. This was a gap that couldn't be made up for in a short period of time, so he could only think of a way through the spell. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but shake his head. The threat of the demons was right in front of him, and there were too many things he had to do. However, the more it was at this time, the more he had to be stable and not mess up. Fortunately, he could turn his consciousness into a doppelganger, and his spirit will could be stored for an endless amount of time. However, the deduction wouldn't be able to last long in the real world. In the following days, he started to deduce the spell, and when there were results, he would verify it with Dan Yi from time to time. When he saw any flaws, he would correct them. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed, and both of them had gained a lot. After a few days, Machito Ichito returned from outer space. This time, he had gathered all the suitable stars and roughly refined them. As long as he wanted to use them as the foundation of the formation, he would have to continue. However, these stars could only be refined by him alone. It wasn't that the others didn't want to help, but that the essence chi used in the stars couldn't be too mixed, or else there would be a huge difference, which would deviate from the original purpose. The elephant dragon gold cauldron had undergone great changes in recent days. Due to the refinement of many good items, the glow on the cauldron had brightened, and the cauldron was never tired of it. Its gains in the past few days had far surpassed what it had obtained in the past 1,000,000 years. This was to be expected. The things that a true young almighty figure wanted were definitely not things that ordinary cultivators could compare to. However, the difference in cultivation was like the difference between heaven and earth. Before Machito Ichito prepared to go into seclusion, he found the three of them and said, "I need to focus on refining the foundation of the formation, so I might not be able to split myself. Do the three of you have anything to tell me?" Dan Yi said, "There is indeed one thing. After fellow Zhang and I have refined the magic treasures, we will start to arrange the formation. However, we don't know where to place the formation. The location of the formation could only be at a place that was away from everyone's territory. Otherwise, once a battle broke out, all the living beings in the various worlds would be involved." Machito Ichito thought for a while and said, "There is nothing in the territory of second brother. Only this world still has living beings, but it's easy to move out. Why don't you set the place where the battle takes place at?" Dan Yi said, "That's fine too. We're already in fellow Daoist Yi's territory, so there's no need to waste time looking for another one." Once this tribulation is over, I'll try to compensate fellow Taoist. Ichido waved his hand and said, these are nothing. These are useless places anyway. Besides, if we can defeat the demons, we can enter Bu Su Tian to cultivate. We don't have to care about these things. Dan Yi saw that Fu Qingming was in deep thought and did not speak for a long time. He asked curiously, fellow Fu, do you have any ideas? Fu Qingming raised his head and looked at the three of them. He said, fellow Yi, you mentioned earlier that in order to find out the inside story of Bu Su Tian, you have worked together to refine a spell and captured the incarnation of a demon for me to use? When Dan Yi heard this, he seemed to have guessed something. His spirits rose slightly. He said, yes, there is such a thing. What is fellow Fu trying to say? Fu Qingming said, I am thinking that the spiritual world Rui will only stop us, but it will not stop itself. Is the incarnation of the demon also included? If I can capture one and use the same method as before, then I can try to send it to Bu Su Tian. If I succeed, I might be able to use it to get more treasures. Then I will have a way to obtain the treasures used for the suppression formation. Ichido thought for a while and said, maybe it's possible. Now that the demons are fighting with the four fellow Yi, they can't be distracted. We may be able to take advantage of this loophole. Dan Yi thought for a while and looked at Zhang Yan. He said, what does fellow Zhang think? The three of them also looked at it. Previously, when they were refining the spell, Zhang Yan was the one who carried everyone's yuan qi. It could be said that he was the most important part, so his opinion was naturally very important. Zhang Yan thought for a while. In fact, he had tried to think in this direction before. Back then, the seven of them worked together and just now, they could refine the spell. Although there were only four of them now, because they had experienced it once, and his strength was not what it used to be, they might be able to succeed. However, a few of the 8 formations in the divine will had to be removed first. This might affect the success of the final formation. Even without mentioning this, there were still many problems here. Not to mention whether the incarnation of the demon could be blocked by the spiritual world Rui. Even if everything went smoothly, it would not be easy to get the treasures from Bu Su Tian. And would the spiritual world Rui let the demon incarnation go? This kind of thing could not be tested in advance, because as soon as the incarnation was moved, it might be discovered by the demons, and then there would be no chance. They could only first capture it and then test it. In addition to this, there was an even more important reason, which also made him not optimistic about this method. He raised his head and said, previously, when we used the incarnation technique to probe inside, the demons had already sensed it. This time, if we come out empty-handed, we will definitely not be unprepared. Therefore, I think that this method will not work. Fu Qingming sighed and said, this is my lack of consideration. Zhang Yan knew that it was not that Fu Qingming did not consider this point, but that they were now on the weaker side, and they did not want to let go of any chance of winning. However, there were too many variables here, and it was very likely that they would put in a lot of effort, only to find that in the end, there was no harvest at all. If there was enough time, he did not mind giving it a try, but in the limited time, there was bound to be a choice. Just as they were discussing, an inexplicable feeling arose in the four of them, but they could not explain it clearly. They suddenly realized that something had happened. Dan Yi said, fellow Taoist Yi, is it possible to calculate? Ichido took out the disc and calculated for a long time. After a while, he said in a heavy voice, there is a flaw in the universe, and the spiritual opportunity is obscure. I speculate that perhaps a fellow Taoist has been suppressed and no longer exists in this world. Zhang Yan pondered for a moment. If that was really the case, then the fact that they were able to sense some clues at this moment undoubtedly meant that the spirit world Rui scepter was gradually relaxing its obstruction towards them. This was actually not a good thing, because it was very likely that the fiendish demon had the absolute upper hand. From the looks of it, the end of the battle was probably not far away. Chapter 1694. In the Kun's mansion, Meng Zhida was sitting on a cushion while facing the sea. A bamboo book that was about 10 feet wide floated in front of him. Ever since he entered this place, he had found quite a few books about cultivation. However, what he gained the most was not the books, but the fact that he could see the path ahead of him. He felt as if his vision had broadened and was no longer as vague and obscure as before. After he finished reading the book in his hand, he put it away and stood up. He had decided to leave this place today and return to the sect. There were quite a few books here, but he didn't look at them. He felt that these were enough for now. There was no point in looking at them, and it would only disturb his own cultivation. After leaving the cave, he sensed that there were still several auras around. He knew that sect leader Qin and the others were still comprehending the mysteries, so he didn't disturb them. Instead, he saw a rainbow light flying towards him. He stepped on it, and in the blink of an eye, he was already in front of the realm pass. He turned around and bowed to Yu Kuan and Ing Zhao before stepping through. When he came out, he was already in the mountain and sea realm, so he sank down and turned into a ray of light that fell into the void sea. When he reached the door, he saw a ball of aura swimming towards him. In an instant, it merged together and Sun Jian appeared. He saluted him and said, "Senior brother, how was your trip?" Meng Zhida asked, "How is the sect?" Sun Jian said, "There are no enemies outside, and no worries inside. Everything is going well." Meng Zhida said in a low voice, "It's not that there are no enemies, but Hall Master Du Zhen has blocked the great calamity from me. If I were to be suppressed, I would definitely be crushed." Sun Jian said in a carefree manner, "This is not something I can control. If that's the case, why should I worry about it? It will only add to my worries." Meng Zhida looked at him and sighed, "Junior brother, you are a true person. I have obtained many opportunities in the Kun residence, and I will take care of the sect. If junior brother has nothing to do, you can go there. Don't miss the opportunity." Sun Jian said with interest, "Senior brother, did you see the things left behind by the founder?" Meng Zhida said, "It's difficult for me to explain these things. I can only say that in that cave, everyone has their own fate. Junior brother, you can explore on your own." Sun Jian nodded and said, "Then I'll take my leave first, senior brother." He cupped his fists again and with a flick of his sleeve, he walked into the realm gate. Just as Meng Zhida was about to return to the mountain, he suddenly felt something. He realized that there was an additional majestic qi of qi in the world compared to when he left. He looked towards the direction of the qi dynamic and realized that this qi penetrated through the clouds, and there was a faint flash of lightning. It was the most righteous qi. He said, "There is another Taoist friend who entered the upper state. Looking at this boundary, he should be in the Guanyin state. It seems like he is a fellow Taoist of Huanjin Temple." He thought for a while and knew the identity of this person. When someone achieved Tao, out of etiquette, he should send someone to congratulate him. However, considering that this person had a close relationship with Hall Master Du Zhen, he did not need to overstep his boundaries. Thus, he turned around and went back to his own hall. At this moment, in the depths of the void, Dan Yi and the others guessed that one of their Taoist friends might have died. Thus, they felt more and more anxious. In terms of battle power, Lu Lin and the others were not as strong as the demons. If another person died, the battle situation that they had been maintaining would collapse even faster. Dan Yi said in a deep voice, "Everyone, it seems that we are not here for anything. We can only hurry up and settle the matter in front of us." Michihito Ichido said, "Then I will leave the matter here to the three of you." Having said that, he did not delay any further. He cupped his hands and left with the elephant dragon golden furnace. Zhang Yan pondered for a moment. At this moment, there were two important things that needed to be done first. One was the existence of the ninth world's heaven in the will of God. Although he had some clues about it, he still lacked an opportunity. This could not be forced, so he could only put it aside for now. The other was to set up the array formation. Thus, he suggested, "Fellow Taoists, let's first work together to set up the defensive array formation. Even if the demons come, we can at least slow them down. If it's possible, we can also set up more while defending." Dan Yi said, "This is exactly what I want." Fu Qingming did not have any different opinion at this moment. At this moment, the situation was different from before. Just now, his suggestion was obviously not going to work. Seeing that both of them agreed, Zhang Yan turned his divine will and escaped into an unknown place. He began to set up the formation. After a while, Dan Yi and Fu Qingming also escaped to this place and observed from the side. Under the Weili of a true Yang cultivator, there was no clear boundary between the divine will and the real world. After setting up the formation, it could be reflected in the real world. Although this would consume a large amount of vitality, at the moment, they had no choice but to do so. Perhaps in a few days, the demons would find them. Although the real situation might not be like this, at this time, they had to plan for the worst. Not long after, a large formation appeared. Zhang Yan pointed and said, "This is the 9-linked absolute Yang formation." Although this formation has the word absolute in it, it is absolute against the enemy and is born according to the user. It is best used to stop the enemy. Fu Qingming praised, "The few great formations that fellow Taoist Zhang has brought are all extremely impressive, especially this one. It can attach itself to the void primordial sea, and any external force that comes over will be diverted into the void. If one doesn't understand the profoundness behind it, there's practically nothing that can break through it. This can buy me more time." Zhang Yan said, "Even so, those demons originally cultivated under the human Tao. They are also proficient in formation theory. If they find the key point, it will not be difficult to break it. Therefore, we need to set up another formation base and slightly change it to confuse them." He knew that although this formation was said to be entrusted to the void, it was actually not like that. What it could bear was actually the various desolate realms. The real advantage of this formation was that even if these realms were destroyed, they would not be harmed at all. Because there were so many such realms. As long as the fiendish demons were able to restrict the formation to a single realm, they would be able to cut off the foundation of the formation. However, before they were completely certain of this, they would most likely not do so, because the amount of yuan qi required was no less than a battle with someone of the same generation. Fu Qingming thought for a while and said, "If fellow Zhang wants to change, it is best to use an artifact to suppress this place. An artifact could follow its master." Moreover, treasures that could not be used by true Yang cultivators all had their own Weili, so it was not a problem for them to bear a formation. Moreover, the power of the treasure was different, and it could even cause some magical changes to the formation. Danny said, "Refining a treasure is not something that can be done in a short period of time. Now that fellow Zhang Yan is still using the golden cauldron, in my opinion, we do not need to give up this formation." Zhang Yan said, "What is fellow Zhang's opinion?" Danny said, "This formation was originally passed down by fellow Zhang's sect. Fellow Zhang Yan and I do not know as much as fellow Zhang Yan. How about this, we will first set up this formation outside, and fellow Zhang Yan can change it elsewhere. This way, we will not waste any time." Zhang Yan thought for a while and said, "All right, but I will have to trouble you too, fellow Zhang Yan." Danny said, "It's just a bit of vitality." Setting up a large formation also required precious materials, but they could easily see that. The only thing that would be consumed would be vitality. Moreover, with Zhang Yan's detailed demonstration here, all the changes inside the formation were included, so they only needed to copy. After the two of them memorized all the changes inside and outside the formation, they bowed and left respectively. Zhang Yan stayed here to deduce. He had 3 formations that were the most suitable for the current situation, but in the end, he decided to take them out first, which was the one just now. Even if this formation was broken, it would be able to consume a lot of magic power of the attacker. As the saying goes, no matter how many changes there are, it is still the same. Even if he changed it, he was not prepared to give up the advantages of this formation. After Dan Yi and the other two familiarized themselves with the setting up of the formation, when the demon attacked, as long as it could not break the formation in one go, they could set up layers of obstructions and take turns to resist. This way, they could trade small for big. Under normal circumstances, they could even force the demon to continuously consume vitality. Unfortunately, the Khanate demon might have the Khanate cardinal treasure, Tai golden bead. If it was used to break the formation, they would not be able to do anything. However, according to their previous deduction, it was impossible for the demon to use this item without any hindrance. If they could force it to use it first, they would have a chance of winning. After straightening out his thoughts, he calmed his mind and began to deduce with this formation as the foundation. After an unknown period of time, as he stopped, another formation appeared in front of him. The changes of the formation depended on the mastery of the formation theory of the person who set it up. This was similar to cultivation, there was almost no end to it. However, the more complicated it was, the longer it took to set it up, and the higher the requirement for the treasure to suppress the formation. Therefore, this time, he was actually trying his best to maintain the power of the formation and reduce it. This way, it was easy to set up, and there was no need for the treasure to suppress the formation. More importantly, it was convenient for everyone to arrange it. At this moment, his mind suddenly flashed, and he thought of something. Previously, he had been unable to visualize the ninth sky world. Every time, he was just a little bit away, unable to condense it at the last moment. He once deduced that this might be because his yuan qi and cultivation were insufficient, but now it seemed that it should be on the formation. Perhaps once the changes of the nine sky world formations appeared, the power would increase by another level. Although he had already deduced all the changes, the divine decree was not in the present world after all. There might still be some disharmony that he had yet to discover, so he could not completely unify it. If this obstacle was not solved, the divine decree would not be able to evolve. However, he could not complete the 9 sky world formations, and there were only 8 in front of him. Even if he moved it into the present world, the problem was that he could not find it. This was another contradiction. However, now that he thought about it, he could think of a way to store it. The 9th formation could not be stored in the void, but on a treasure. The previous treasures could not be stored, but now that he had the glazed lotus, it was enough to store it. As soon as this thought popped up, his mind suddenly became clear. He immediately transferred the glazed lotus cup into his spirit will and placed it on the array. Then, he started visualizing. This time, there were no more obstacles. In a split second, the 9th world was opened up in his spirit will. As soon as this method was completed, he immediately opened his eyes and retreated from the divine decree. Then, he used his mind to observe. In an instant, the 9 sky world fell into the primordial sea of the void and formed a mysterious formation. At this moment, he took back the glazed lotus cup and allowed the last formation to be stored in the void. Then, he went back and forth to carefully examine it. It did not take long for him to find out where the tiny loopholes were. After reading all these, he vaguely understood something. His cultivation of the Tao in the divine decree had unknowingly improved by another level. After noticing this change, he nodded slightly and thought to himself, external demons can train the heart, and tribulations are also opportunities. Although the battle with the demons is dangerous, if I can get through it, it will be a different world. Chapter 1695. After Zhang Yan made up for all the mistakes, he understood all the changes. However, because he had shown the 9 world skies into the world, the divine will was now completely empty. He had to evolve it again. But this time, he did not plan to follow the previous path. The previous change of the 9 worlds was his own deduction. Based on his original idea, it was only to be used as a trapping formation in battle and as a method to assist from the side. He did not have much hope for it. However, after obtaining more secret techniques from the Kun residents, he realized that there was actually a lot of potential here. According to the secret technique, building a sky barrier formation in the divine will and then shining it into the world was actually a path of battle, especially suitable for people with abundant yuan qi like him. Previously, because of the failure of the 9 worlds, if he gave up halfway and couldn't find out where the problem was, he would instead fail on both ends. Thus, he didn't delve too deeply into it. Now that he was freed from the situation, he could give it a try. The original world skies and the restriction formation attached to it were separated because his original intention was to comprehend the mysteries of the world. Now that he had to start from the beginning, according to the secret technique, they had to complement each other and become one. It was not the restriction formation supporting the world skies, nor was it the world skies supporting the great formation. Instead, they were yin and yang, the outside and the inside. Because the world that was created in this way was completely used for battle, there would not be any living beings in it. Because time was tight, he immediately visualized in the divine will after making his decision. Every time his yuan qi was damaged too much, he would retreat to recuperate. Once he recovered a little, he would retreat into the unknown again. This cycle continued without a moment of rest. In just over a month, he had constructed 9 world skies again. Although the number was the same as before, the inside was completely different. The spiritual vigor of heaven and earth here was different, and the power of the restrictive formation was different. If any of the restrictive formations were to appear in the world alone, they could be easily broken. However, if they were to be combined, they could evolve into great power. In order to check if there were any flaws, he did not hesitate to expend his Fa Li to move it into the world again. As soon as the 9 realms descended, because their vital energies came from the same source, they immediately linked up, circulating the skies, growing and multiplying endlessly. He silently observed and relied on this formation to transform the place where he stood into a place where the void rotated. So long as his enemy fell here with him, then all changes would be unable to escape his senses. Not only would he be able to utilize the energy of the formation to resist his enemy's attacks, he could even avoid numerous lethal attacks at will. As long as he was in this formation, he would be the ruler of this domain. This was because he could make up for any gaps at any time. It was not impossible for his opponent to defeat him here, but the price they had to pay was extremely great. This had achieved the goal of exhausting his opponent. Actually, there was still a lot of room for improvement here, but he was able to sense that if he wanted to improve further, then it would involve some changes in the Tao art. This was something that was difficult to comprehend in a short period of time, and it required a long period of accumulation. He'd carefully considered this aspect before and didn't continue to dig deeper into it. All of this was already sufficient for now, and if he couldn't avoid this calamity, then no matter how many profound techniques he possessed, it would be useless. After completely inspecting it, he noted down all the flaws and then waved his sleeve, dispelling the void in front of him. Then, he reconstructed it in his will of divinity. This time, he made rapid progress. In less than a year's time, he was successful. After he came out of meditation, he examined it for a bit. He believed that with this formation and the instruments around him, it wouldn't be difficult for him to fight against a demon in a one-on-one battle. However, it would be difficult for him to fight against another famous opponent. After all, the other generation had Tao instruments, and it wasn't as simple as having one more person. Though he had the help of his comrades, among the 4 of them, if one of them collapsed, then the situation would immediately turn for the worse. This wasn't because he didn't trust Dan Yi and the others, but because there were far too many variables in a battle. Even he himself didn't dare to say that he could guarantee that nothing would go wrong. As a result, he thought that he needed to prepare a backup plan. At the very least, when 2 or 3 opponents suddenly appeared in front of him at the same time, he wouldn't be immediately suppressed. Even if he had the victorious heavenly vessel and wasn't afraid of being surrounded, if the other party couldn't find him, they would look for others, and that wouldn't be beneficial to the battle. As a result, it was best to take the initiative to attack. If he could tie down 1 or 2 opponents, then the others would have more opportunities. As a result, with a thought, a jade plate floated out. It shone brilliantly and was pure white. It was the spatial concealment jade embryo. This treasure could also be considered a Tao instrument. If Huan Tong hadn't intentionally split it into 2 back then, it would have fallen into the hands of the demons a long time ago. However, it was a pity that it didn't have any offensive ability and could only be used to divert external forces. It seemed that Huan Tong's original intention of refining this item was to coordinate with the Great Formation. However, the restriction of life sacrificing required the right time and place, so it couldn't be used again now. Zhang Yan thought that since this path couldn't be taken, he could take another path. If he set up another formation with this item and used it with the glazed lotus cup, it might be able to produce a miraculous effect. He had this plan before, but he had more important things to do, so he put it to the back. Now, he could put it into action. As a result, his gaze focused on this item, and according to the aura of this treasure, he entered his divine will to develop the formation, and from time to time, he would retreat and adjust his breathing. This round of cultivation took another half a year. On this day, when he was recovering his vitality, he felt some movement outside. He looked up and saw Dan Yi and Fu Qingming appear from the void. He shook his sleeves and stood up. The two of them quickly approached him and greeted him. Dan Yi said, "Daoist Zhang, Daoist Fu, and I have been setting up 5 great formations outside. If the demons find their way here, as long as they barge into the formations, we will be able to trap them for quite some time. We will have the chance to set up more formations." Fu Qingming said in a deep voice, "It's not impossible to break it, unless they use the Tai golden bead to break the formation." Zhang Yan smiled. This was actually the smallest possibility. This formation was not like the land of extreme void that Lu Lin and the others had spent millions of years to refine. As long as one understood the principles of the formation, one would be able to break it with just a little effort. In a situation where it was obvious that there was a limit to using the supreme treasure, this person would definitely not make such a choice. If he really did so, it would be exactly what they wished for. Dan Yi said again, "We can continue, but Daoist Yi is almost done. When he brings the elephant dragon golden cauldron back, we can start refining the treasure." Although the situation was urgent, they had achieved their original goals one by one. Compared to not long ago, the 4 of them had much more confidence and were no longer powerless to fight back. After the 3 of them talked for a while, the aura of heaven and earth moved, and Michihito Ichido appeared out of nowhere in the sky. Seeing that the 3 of them were there, he slowly floated down and came up to greet them. After greeting, Dan Yi asked, "Daoist Yi, did it go well this time?" Michihito Ichido said emotionally, "Although there were twists and turns this time, I understood a key point that I couldn't figure out in the past. In the end, I achieved my wish, and it can be said that I'm blessed by the heavens." He flicked his sleeve and took out the elephant dragon golden cauldron. He removed the lid and saw the shadows of millions of stars floating in the water mist. There were rainbows that pierced through the sky and reflected the clouds, shooting tens of thousands of feet away. Upon closer inspection, each star was almost the same in terms of aura and elemental energy. Danny sighed, "Michihito Ichido has really put in a lot of effort." Michihito Ichido went up and touched it with his hand. All the stars here shot out rainbows and leaped out, gathering in the sky and forming a majestic formation. He pointed and said, "This is the 10,000 stars returned to origin formation. It can be divided and combined, and it can also gather people in one place. As long as we are familiar with the changes inside, we can step into the formation at will and come and go as we please. When the time comes, we can also let this generation have a taste of being divided and broken by others." At this point, he said regretfully, "It's a pity that this formation relies a lot on the treasure to suppress it. Otherwise, it would be inevitable that it would be easily broken by others." Unlike Zhang Yan, who tried to simplify the formation as much as possible to make it easier to use, his formation was exquisite and complicated. Naturally, the requirement for the treasure to suppress was not small. Fu Qingming said indifferently, "That's not a problem. We don't expect to be able to defeat the enemy with this. We just want to exhaust the demon's elemental energy as much as possible." Zhang Yan also nodded. Originally, he had the ability to calculate the enemy's position, and he also had the heavenly fusion snake hoop. If he could make good use of this, in the best-case scenario, he might be able to kill one of them. But don't forget that the opponent had the mysterious beginning sun mirror painting. As long as the elemental energy was not exhausted, it was almost impossible to be defeated. Therefore, the only way left was to compete with the enemy in terms of elemental energy consumption. Relying on the formation that was set up beforehand, they could gain some advantage in this aspect. Dan Yi said, Daoist E, this formation can be placed behind the 5 formations that we have set up as the second layer of protection. Fu Qingming glanced at the elephant dragon golden cauldron and said, next, it will be time to start the sacrificial refining of the formation's enchanted artifact. The earlier it is done, the more we can rely on. Dan Yi nodded in agreement. At this moment, he looked at the 3 of them and said solemnly, everyone, if we win this battle, there is naturally no need to say more. But if it is really difficult to win, there is no need for you to fight to the death. As long as we exist in this world, we can repeat today's situation. We will not let this generation destroy our humanity. If Lu Lin and the others had really escaped to that realm, then he would have risked his life and fought. After all, even if they all died, there would still be people Dao Yuan venerates left in this world. However, now that there were only a few of them left, the people Dao would really perish if they were defeated and killed. Now that the victorious heavenly ship was here, if everyone wanted to retreat, they could still struggle to survive. But at that time, they could only wait for the changes in the heavenly secrets. It was already impossible to rely on themselves to fight back. After the 4 of them discussed, they continued to make preparations separately. But this time, only a few days had passed, but the 4 of them were shocked at the same time. They looked up and found that the spirit world's Wuqi activity was shaking. At the same time, an extremely strong sense of danger also rose in their hearts. Chapter 1696. When the 4 of them sensed the abnormality, they stopped what they were doing and looked towards the sky. However, when they looked at the sky, they realized that the outside world was still calm and there were no changes. But the more it was so, the more they couldn't relax. Dan Yi's expression was solemn as he said, I believe that all of you have sensed the abnormality. However, the spiritual Rui is still covering the void and has not been dispelled. It should be that the 4 of you haven't decided the winner. I don't know where the abnormality is. Fu Qingming said solemnly, no matter what, there must be a reason for this. There's a high chance that the Khanate demon is up to something again. He might even come knocking on our door. We have to speed up our preparations. The thing that could threaten them now was definitely related to the few Khanate demons. They were not fully prepared yet. If the demons attacked, they didn't know what their chances of winning were. However, the 4 of them had already expected such a situation. After all, the demons wouldn't act according to one's plan. Dan Yi calculated and said, we still need about a month's time before these formation treasures can be successfully refined. When the formation is complete, we won't have to fear them anymore. So even if the demons attack now, we have to think of a way to delay them. Zhang Yan thought about it. Since the appearance of the abnormality, it was getting closer. It was obvious that it was not far from the time when the demons would attack. He said, the outermost few formations are set up by I am most familiar with them. We can go to the outermost area to defend. He looked at the 3 of them. Everyone, continue to work here. Even if the demons come, I will try my best to delay them. If it is too difficult to stop them, I will call for you. Dan Yi's thoughts changed. He considered that they couldn't afford to be unprepared outside, and it was impossible for them to stop what they were doing before the enemy arrived. This seemed to be the most suitable choice at the moment, so he solemnly cupped his hands and said, I'll have to trouble you, fellow Taoist Zhang. Zhang Yan returned the salute, and with a thought, he was already in the middle of the formation, standing on a defensive position. He had already prepared everything, but since he was already here, there was no need for him to sit around and wait. Dan Yi and Wang Chong were only here because they needed to use the Elephant Dragon Gold Furnace to refine their transcendent artifacts. Just now, they had returned. It didn't mean that they couldn't add more. Since they had determined that a great enemy was about to arrive, they should continue to set up. After all, there was no such thing as too many restrictive formations. He stretched out his hand and pointed downwards. As his fingers moved, countless auras surged. Then, array altars and treasures appeared one by one. His vital chi was deep, and he did things he was familiar with. In just 3 to 4 days, he had set up a large formation. But he didn't stop because of this. As long as the demons didn't arrive, the formation would continue to increase. At the same time, he was also visualizing and verifying in the divine decree. As he operated it over and over again, he gradually felt some deeper principles, and unknowingly, he was immersed in it. About a month later, the various worlds in the void suddenly fluctuated, as if a tyrannical aura was about to arrive. Zhang Yan's eyes flickered slightly, and he stopped what he was doing. He stood up from his position and raised his head to look outside. There were ripples in the void, followed by the arrival of a powerful aura. Then, a languid-looking, gray-robed, long-bearded Taoist appeared in front of him. His body was surrounded by turbid clouds, and his clothes were adorned with horned dragons. He held an ancient mirror in his hand, and stepped on a three-headed Ganoderma. He was one of the 4 Khanate demons, Treasure Origin Temple Heavenly Master Lu Li. As soon as he arrived, he felt that someone was observing him. His dispirited expression disappeared, and his eyes flashed as he observed the surroundings. However, Zhang Yan was currently in the formation, so he couldn't see what was happening inside. He only quickly discovered the formation in front of him. But he was very cautious, and didn't act rashly. He only observed from the outside, as if he was looking for a loophole. Zhang Yan watched for a moment. Although the Khanate demons could change their appearance at will, they wouldn't change their usual appearance. Judging from the aura and appearance, he could roughly determine the identity of the incomer. He transmitted his divine decree, "Everyone, the demons have arrived, but there's only one in front of us. I will stay here and keep an eye on him." On the other side, the 3 of them also noticed the arrival of the demons. Danny took a glance and said, "This demon is called Lu Li. In terms of mana, he's second only to Bai Wei. I wonder if he's alone, or all of them are here." Fu Qingming thought for a moment and deduced, it should be just one person. This generation has the advantage, so there's no need to deliberately mystify things. I think that they're afraid that I'll make some powerful arrangements here, so they sent this person to disturb me. Michihito Ichito also said, "That's right." The spirit world Rui didn't retreat, which is enough to say that the battle hasn't been decided yet, so this generation can't all rush here. Danny thought for a moment and guessed, if that's the case, the Taoist from before might have used a supernatural power to delay the battle. The demons realized his intention, so they turned to us. The trio's guess was already very close to the truth. After Bai Wei and the other Khanate demons used their Khanate cardinal treasures to destroy the land of extreme emptiness that Lu Lin and company had set up, they immediately took action with the intention of killing the 4 people Path Yuanzun in one fell swoop. With the Dao weapons in hand, they had the absolute upper hand from the start. Although Lu Lin and company's counterattacks were weak, they resisted tenaciously and were extremely resilient. In a battle between true yang cultivators, even without Zhang Yan's method of destroying the source of true yang energy, as long as there was an inexhaustible supply of true yang energy, they would not perish. Although the 4 of them destroyed the avatars over and over again, they were still able to hold their ground. If it was a junior cultivator, the best thing to do at this moment would be to split up. However, Dozhan, a true yang cultivator, did not have such a rule. This was because as long as he was not trapped by the formation and knew where his opponent's chi was, he could go to any place in the universe with a single thought. However, Lu Lin and company were ultimately no match for the power of the Dao weapon. Foreseeing that they would be defeated in a dozen years at most, Chen Chan took the initiative to step forward. He used his body as a dharma and sacrificed his life to create an art of confusion that enveloped both sides. As long as the demons continued to fight with them, they would be decades or even centuries behind when they left. Bai Wei and company immediately realized that something was wrong. Although the array could be broken by the Tai golden bead, the Khanate cardinal treasure could only be used 3 times. They were naturally unwilling to use it. They could also see that Lu Lin and company were intentionally delaying the battle. They were clearly buying time for someone. Since they realized it, they naturally would not ignore it. Previously, they had been blocked by Yu Huan in the Bushu heaven. Later on, they were almost trapped in the land of extreme void. If they had not persuaded the Tai golden bead to help, the outcome would be unpredictable. Therefore, they understood that if these people were given enough time, it was hard to say what they would come up with. Therefore, they decided on the spot that one of them would go out and stop them. After Lu Li received the order, he immediately jumped out of the shroud of qi. However, in the beginning, they did not know where Daoist Yi's world was, so they used the Dao artifact, Imperial Universe Yellow Sky Mirror, to observe the 10,000 worlds in the heavens. After a long time, they finally found the location of the 4 people. Inside the formation, Zhang Yan saw that Lu Li did not come in. He did not move either. This delay was beneficial to them. There was no need for him to rush into battle. After observing for a long time, Lu Li finally decided to go in and take a look. His purpose of coming here was to pressure Dan Yi and the others and to disrupt the setup. He did not want them to prepare in peace. It was impossible for them to do nothing outside. In this case, it would be meaningless to come here. Also, he had seen it. The formation did not seem complicated. Even if there were any miraculous changes, it could not do anything to him. After making up his mind, he took out a spell. There was a faint glow on his Dharma body. Then, he stepped in. When Zhang Yan saw this, he willed the array to activate. The 9 consecutive absolute Yang array did not have the ability to injure the enemy. It was only used to trap the enemy. Since a Khanate fiendish demon was here, it was a good opportunity to test his abilities. At first, things went well for Lu Li. But as he went deeper, he realized he could not find a way out. He once cultivated under a mighty warrior of the human Tao. He knew a thing or two about formations. He knew that if he followed the prescribed order, if the master of the formation was not willing, he would never be able to get out. Therefore, Lu Li did not hold back. He looked at the formation and everything around him began to collapse. He did not need to use any spells. He just needed to use his mind. As long as he thought the formation was gone and no one from the same generation came to stop him, it would not take long before the formation was gone. Zhang Yan saw that he did not hesitate when he attacked. The might of his magic power was vast and intense, without the slightest scruple. His body was also full of vitality. Zhang Yan considered that this person had just escaped from Lu Lin's battle, yet he was still able to maintain such a perfect state. He must have some method to replenish his vitality at any time. This was bad news. It meant that if this war of attrition went on, even if it went smoothly, it would be a long and bitter battle. But in this regard, Lu Li was not afraid at all. Seeing that the formation was about to collapse, Lu Li thought of something and tried to maintain it. All the turbulence was calmed down. Lu Li immediately sensed this resistance and knew that a human Dao Yuan Venerate had made a move. However, he had achieved his goal. It seemed that there was only one person who had made a move against him, which was not what he wanted. What he wanted was for everyone to be unable to calm down. Hence, he continued to exert more pressure on the array. At this moment, Zhang Yan was certain that the other party had come alone. However, he was pondering whether he should try to kill the fiendish demon in front of him right now. There was still a chance. If he could kill the demon in one move, then he would only have to face 3 demons in the future. It would be much easier to deal with them. But if he failed, then his killer move would be exposed. It would be impossible to catch the demon off guard in the future. After weighing the pros and cons, he decided not to use this method for now. Instead, he would slowly deal with the demon. After all, it was only one demon that had returned. Even if it had a doctrine weapon, he might be able to suppress it with the formation under his feet. Even if he really could not, he could make a decision based on the changes in the battle.